Awesome. Welcome everybody to our Planning Commission meeting this evening, August 16, 2023. My name is Jason Hansen, the current chair of the Planning Commission. We're going to go ahead and begin our evening with a invocation by Commissioner Mitchell, followed by, I'll go ahead and lead everybody in the Pledge of Allegiance after that. Commissioner Mitchell.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful to be here this evening. We're thankful to be a part of this meeting. At this time, we give thanks for all that was given us. We give you thanks for the opportunity we have to live in such a wonderful area. We pray at this time as we go throughout the agenda items that we can do so in orderly fashion and that we can all share our thoughts and ideas in a pleasant way. We're grateful for our city and for all those who serve and make it what it is. And this we pray and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner Mitchell. I'd like to welcome you all again, like I mentioned earlier, and welcome to some of the city council members that are here in the audience, and to our city attorney, Mr. Siegmiller. Thank you for attending as well. We'll go ahead and start this evening with the approval of the agenda as outlined, commissioners. If there are any changes, please bring them forth at this time. Otherwise, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as is.
This is Commissioner Bullock. I make a motion to approve the agenda as it's stated.
Commissioner Tupou, I second that.
I've got a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is set as is. The second item is the approval of the minutes from the July 19th meeting. We've all received those in our packets to review. If there's any changes at this time to bring forth, otherwise I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from July 19th, 2023. Same, I was not here, I'll abstain.
This is Commissioner Bullock. I make a motion to approve the meetings from the July 19th meeting.
It's Commissioner Tupou, I second that.
Got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the abstentions again, I believe, are the three of us, right? Anderson, Shield, and Hansen. Item number 3, this is an opportunity to declare any reason for an abstention or conflict that you might have, financial conflict with any of the items on the agenda this evening from the commissioners. I do not have any at this time. No? Okay. We'll go to item number 4. This is our first item on the agenda. This is a general plat amendment. It's a public hearing for consideration and recommendation to the City Council for a general plat amendment, G2305, to change from residential low density to neighborhood commercial, located approximately Washington Fields Road and Merrill Road. The applicant is Rosenberg and Associate and Mino Properties, LLC. I'll turn the time over to Eldon for the report.
Thank you, commissioners. Just to clarify, this is a general plan amendment. I think we may have said plat. So general plan amendment. The applicants are seeking to amend the general planned land use map in the area located at the northwest corner of Washington Fields Road and Merrill Road. The requested area covers approximately 5.29 acres. The current land use designation is low density residential. The applicant is seeking approval to have the land use designation changed from the neighborhood commercial general plan to the neighborhood commercial general plan land use designation. The surrounding general plan land use designations are low density residential to the north, south, east, and west. Staff has reviewed the requested change and is comfortable with the proposal, finding the specific location, the intersection of two major roads in the Fields area, to be a possible fit for some commercial services in this particular part of the city. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval for G-23-05 to amend the general plan land use map from the current low-density residential to the proposed neighborhood commercial designation as outlined above and shown in the exhibit as seen on the screen. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, Commissioners, I'll open the floor. Any questions that you have for staff? Then one of the questions I have, and Dad, this might be for you as well. If we're talking about changing the general plan, shouldn't we have an idea of what's being presented? I mean, I know this is opening up to neighborhood commercial, but there's not a project that's associated with it. I think in our packet it said that that was going to come at another time. Is it common to receive it this way, or should we not be having something in front of us to look at?
So our entire general plan was adopted with nothing as far as applications. The entire fields was general planned at a time that didn't, without any designation for applications. And so I think you might be feeling like, man, we'd like to look at details and particulars, but the general plan is meant to be general. In this case, things have changed in that area, and that's simply all it really takes to change your general plan, is to look and say, look, we think that, the traffic situation might justify this to be changed. Now, it is true that usually landowners are the ones that request general plan changes, and there's usually reasons for that. In this case, we don't have those reasons. That's not sitting and waiting to come as soon as this is done, but no, generally speaking, it's meant to be general. It's meant to be a question of, is this a better use than what it's currently planned at? And so it's a broader, farther back perspective than reviewing an application with plans and technical details.
So the question is, do we want neighborhood commercial there instead of residential, I guess, realistically?
Correct.
So this is Sheil. My question is, neighborhood commercial, what are uses that are approved for that?
So the uses for that are administrative, professional, some type of office use, and the C1, light commercial, neighborhood commercial, such as restaurants, retail sales that exist primarily indoors, no outdoor sales.
Can you do a light industrial?
Absolutely not. No industrial.
I just had ideas, so.
Sorry to burst your bubble on that, Commissioner.
Always
but
working, always working. Oh, man. Commissioners, any additional questions that we might have?
Yeah, this Commissioner Tupou, what's the likelihood that if this is approved, neighborhood commercial, that the surrounding land is changed to high density? I mean, we normally see like a buffer between that and commercial, and right now it's low density all around.
Yeah, the piece directly to the south, the church owns. They've had a sign up there for quite some time, the future church, and we're banking on that church coming. Piece directly to the north, there's some larger estate lots. So the only piece really in question is just to the west.
You're saying that any changes like this one would change what the surrounding landowners are going to want to do with their land. And then it'll also affect what this neighborhood, what the nearby neighborhood is going to feel about that.
It could, yeah. It's a difficult piece being on the intersection of two busy roads.
Does the landowner to the north own that, the person that has that house there in the pond and they have a field, do they own that piece all the way to the piece on the project tonight? Do we know?
I'm not sure.
Right here. That's what I'm wondering, if that house owns that piece.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that.
Okay.
I can look that up for you.
The church, the sign's been there for quite a while. Do we know if that's still, I know you said you were hopeful for it. Do we have any idea? Have they come back to us, or do we know any update on that?
I don't have any update at this time.
So the piece directly to the west is low-density residential. Is that correct?
Correct.
This is Commissioner Mitchell. I was just thinking, so this would be similar, I guess not necessarily the same, but on the other side of Nichols Peak is where the new gas station and the new kind of small commercial. I guess I'm kind of picturing a similar type of fill on this corner if the change is made. Other than there won't be a gas station, it sounds like it'd be more
It was- no, it was
offices
agriculture,
or
I was on council,
professional
Then we general planned the
office
whole
space.
field as commercial. And then the council voted it back as public. People disagreed with that.
Better clarify that.
Commissioner Mitchell, the difference is that piece was residential or it was agricultural and then turned into commercial. So it was never residential to begin with. And it was done as part of the general plan with the city or with city council.
Chairman, I can report that the home and then the small pasture and then the larger pasture are all owned under the same ownership. It's a 5-acre kind of cumulative piece there.
Okay.
No, just the two pieces above the site in question. You see kind of the greener pasture. Yeah, there's the home, then there's kind of a riding arena that's kept in dirt, and then there's a irrigated pasture. Those are all owned by the same ownership.
But is the same ownership as this? Okay.
No, yeah, those are not the same ownership as the applicant.
So did you say multifamily is approved or townhomes or something like that?
With this general plan amendment?
Yeah.
No, this is just a general plan designating
In
the
neighborhood commercial, it's not a permitted use.
correct. Yeah, permitted uses is administrative, professional, or the C1 neighborhood commercial.
So the reason why an applicant would be requesting a general plan change is for to support a future zone change, right? And so this does not approve anything as far as zoning or future uses. It just changes our map that says this is generally planned from residential to, and now is generally planned to a community commercial. Now that's usually intended to mean a mix of housing and commercial uses, right? But there would still need to be a zone change if they wanted to go commercial, because the zone's not currently consistent with that, right? There would need to be an application for anything that within that zone change. And so this is not an approval of anything other than just changing the broad general scope of the general plan map. Now it is a change because previously there hasn't been any commercial concept within the general scope at that location, and now there is, or now there's proposed to be. So it'd be a change just to that degree is all.
With the growth that's happened in the area, is there a light planned, street light planned for that intersection? Okay. Commissioners, hold on to any additional questions. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up to a public hearing at this time. For those of you that are new to the Planning Commission meetings, public hearings are designed for you to get your comments recorded on the books and in the minutes for our city council. So a lot of people will come up and ask questions during the public hearing. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can. There might be questions we don't have, but the idea is to get your thoughts, concerns, and opinions on the record for city council to review. We ask that each of you try to take or keep your comments to about 3 minutes if you could, in essence, to keep our meeting in check on timing. And please state your name for the record when you come to the podium so we can have that for our notes and our minutes. If anybody would like to come and speak to this item in the public hearing section, please come forward and state your name. Does not look like we have anybody who'd like to speak to this item this evening. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and open it back up to you, commissioners, for any questions or comments that you have for staff.
If you want to maybe say, what does this change? This change, if approved, would allow a commercial use to come at that site and be considered, whereas currently the staff report would say you don't conform to the general plan, so no, you can't come, right? So this change would open the window in the type of application that might apply in the future that may not qualify today. That's the biggest change of what a decision on this will or won't cause.
Did a similar change like this happen in order for the Church's Corner to become what it is now slated to be?
Churches, I believe, are allowed within residential, so they don't get treated like a commercial use. And so churches don't have to change the general plan.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions, commissioners.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I don't know, as far as, I mean, the city needs commercial, especially community commercial, and this is a great location for it. My hesitancy is, especially without having any public comment from the person living in that house right there, I'd hate to approve, a general plan amendment for commercial right in their backyard without them at least, being here. Now, maybe they want to turn their fields into commercial as well, and they'd be happy for it. I don't know, but I'd hate to do that without at least hearing from them.
So sometimes their lack of presence is the message, right? So we have ordinance that requires that the applicant fund for and facilitate mailing of notices. So sometimes their lack of presence is the message. I don't have specific knowledge on that landowner as to why they aren't here.
Is the applicant here?
While the applicant's making their way up, I have an additional question. Now I'm thinking of it a little bit. With the church slated to come in across the street, so ideally what I would think is we want to happen is to have commercial on both of those corners. Could the church pull out and then it would remain low-density residential? Is that what?
So the church does not have an obligation to build there. We cannot force them to. They could choose to site a new building somewhere else, and that land would essentially become available to the market. And like we see happen with realtors and engineers, I'm sure that there would be ideas for that, its next use. And so could that use change from a church to something in the future? Absolutely. Should it? Probably. A busy corner like that, maybe a church would be smarter to locate somewhere else and let that be a different use. But yeah, really that corner and its future is up to this council and applicants who come and ask this commission and council as to what they want to do with it. But right now it's planned and slated to be a church.
A church. And church is allowed in residential. So I guess, I understand what you said. I guess my thought is the church's corner is low-density residential as well, like they both sit right now. So if we change one, it's conceivable that the other may end up being low-density residential, the church, where the church is. I know that I'm trying to make a match as opposed to not match, I guess.
So we don't get to change the church tonight.
Okay.
So the church is what this one is asking to change from. It's general plan similar to this one.
Okay.
This one is saying, because of the circumstances at this site, we're asking for you to change the general plan as it relates to our acreage. Usually we don't let a landowner submit requests for other people's land on general plan. If we were going to do a broad scope of changing and planning right there along Merrill Road, if you just look at that S section, we would go bring in all those landowners and say, hey, we're considering changing the general plan at our initiative. What do you want? What do you like, right? This is just a focused one from this landowner. And
Right.
yeah, there's nothing in our ordinance that says we have to normalize that with the neighbors here and there. It does say we've got to let them know, we've got to give them a chance to come and talk to us about it.
Okay. Jason, go ahead. Please state your name for the record.
Jason Smith, representing the applicant.
So Jason, this is Commissioner Anderson. My question, again, I think it's a good location for community commercial, but I would assume more than likely if this gets, general plan for this, probably the rest of it all will too. And have you guys made any communication or contact with, in particular, that one homeowner right there that's going to be surrounded?
No direct communication. We did send notices out to, I believe it's 300 feet outside of what it is. And it's actually more than that because I have to meet the 30 applicant.
Right.
So, we've notified halfway up Lost Ridge and then everything that borders it and down. So.
And I get that. The people in Lost Ridge and the people across the street, at least they've got a busy street buffering them. It's just this one person has lived there their whole lives with all their fields around them, and suddenly they could be completely surrounded by
We didn't knock on the door.
commercial.
But they should have received notices as far as the tax, just like the tax notice you get.
Yeah, people don't always get that though, so that's my concern. And they may want to do the same thing with their property. They may be totally fine with it. Again, I think it's a great location for it. I just don't feel comfortable without knowing that person's been talked to, at least. Yeah, that was my question.
So this area is interesting because you've got several large agricultural pieces, some of the few remaining large agriculturally managed lands nearby. To the east there, you've got that farm that in theory could all come in for a commercial. The bigger acreage to the west is on the other end of Merrill Road there. The Adams properties could all come in for commercial someday too, and those aren't even incorporated into the city yet. Those are still, county. And so there's a lot still needs to be planned down in that area if properties start to convert from the agricultural heritage to, more modern uses.
Without any additional questions, if there are, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll look for a motion on item 4A. Or if there needs to be discussion between us as commissioners.
This is Commissioner Bullock. I can't help but think that there's something planned for this. Not just to change the general plan. Obviously there's long-term plan for something to go here, or else you don't go in and ask to change your property. I'm kind of curious. Neighborhood commercial, but I worry about. I was all for the other one on the other side of Nichols Peak. This one, I feel like we're spot doing it and not a general plan. I know we're amending the general plan, but I feel like we're picking spots to do it rather than making sure that we have a good general plan set up to go through this. And right now, times have changed, but when's our next update to the general plan going to be?
We usually update the general plan in phases for different areas. I don't know that there's not an update for this area scheduled. If the Adams property ever wants to annex into the city, I think that would trigger a general plan update for basically everything north, south, and west of Nichols Peak. I'll just say that this application tonight is not irregular. It's common for staff to say, you need to come and ask for the general plan to be amended to reflect what you propose to do. I'm with you. I believe that the property owners or the managers of it have thought about future uses, and that's part of why this is here. as a matter of our city process, we don't get to ask what that end use is. That end use is considered on a different standard than the general plan. The general plan, you can decide not to do it for whatever reason you want, essentially, any legislative purview reason, which is anything from, it's not good for the kids, it's not good for the weather, it's not good for the community, very broad discretion. And then the more defined we get, zoning needs to meet particulars of our code and our ordinance, right? And so the more defined it gets, the more we really drill down on the particulars. And so this one is very big and broad and general. Really, the question is, would it be good or harmful for the community that this general plan allow a usage that includes some commercial at that location? You can ask the applicant if they have ideas in mind that they're willing or able to share. I mean, you're not disallowed from doing that. We as staff don't know what that is.
So this is Commissioner Mitchell. I was just thinking too of like the Hafens property that's on the other side of the street. That, as you were talking about all the different pieces of property that are agricultural that potentially could change. I mean, I feel like there's a big enough chunk right in there that maybe everybody looking at the general plan versus just piecemealing it might be a better approach.
Yeah, I know that if you ask city staff, they would want every acre of the Adams farm to become commercial, right? Because we've not had a lot of commercial in the city. I'm not saying that city leaders and elected folks would agree with that. And it's easy to say stuff like that when it's not even annexed into your city, right? But when the time to annex it comes, that'll trigger a general plan review as to what do we want to generally plan this acreage as. And that's when the commission and the council will actually give designations that'll dictate future uses. Staff don't make the general plan. They just help the commission and council bring it up and refresh it when they're ready.
I have a question for the applicant. Do you know what they actually plan on doing with this rather than just changing it now? It doesn't make sense to change it. I mean, obviously there's future use for it, but is it
Am I right?
Sell?
Is it going to be a Catholic bookstore? Am I right?
It might be beneficial, right? I mean, if the church goes up, it might. Once again, Jason Smith, representing the applicant. I don't have a real good idea. He's talked about a couple things. What happened was, I think he somehow acquired this property kind of sight unseen. He was going to build a house there. It doesn't make sense for him to build a house there in his mind. He has very limited access. He doesn't want his house, doesn't want a large estate house on that type of street. And in the conversation, he said it makes more sense to put commercial on that corner in his conversation with me. I don't know. I mean, we've talked about a variety of options, but there isn't really a plan at this point. He wanted to get through this process before he really went out and started saying, okay, what do I really want in there? Because he doesn't want to go through the hassle if you guys tell him no, he's not going to.
But he does want to switch it to neighborhood commercial and then flip it, sell it, more than likely.
No, not necessarily sell it. I mean, he may do it himself. That's a lot of speculation on my part. I don't know.
Okay.
I apologize. If I had the information.
No, I'm just curious because the reason it is, I mean, you've got massive estates across the street, and then to go into that route, I know it's a busy street, but it's also a lot of very large homes and estates in that area, and it just to put, I don't know, it just there's no feathering into those. And that's my concern. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, but that's my concern with it. Is there's not a lot of feathering. I mean, I know it's neighborhood commercial and it might be something different. We don't know what it's going to be, but I guess we can always change that when it comes. But if it's neighborhood commercial, they don't necessarily have to do a PUD there, correct?
If it's neighborhood commercial, they still have to come and ask you for a zone change. They have to show you feathering. All of those type of details are usually what we deal with at that zone. And so you're right. General plan doesn't require feathering between uses. Usually we try to handle those when there's brass tacks to, you know, paint and position, and we just don't have those right now.
This is Shill. It sounds to me like it's coming, whether we do it piecemeal or if we do it all together. So I think it's a good commercial spot. That I would approve it myself, but
Commissioner Anderson, I think it's a great spot for community commercial and probably most of those other fields too, but my two beefs with it are, one, I've never liked, you know, piecemeal cherry picking general plan amendments. I'd rather that the council look at an area as a whole rather than, you know, one spot at a time. That, and then I have heartburn over not being here. Responsibility other than sending a letter. It just still gives me heartburn.
I can't make the motion, so somebody will need to. My 2 cents is kind of along with Commissioner Shield, and what was said earlier is, do we want this to stay residential or do we want to see it commercial? I think the commercial makes sense. I could see it being with the church being there and additional fields, maybe additional lots maybe coming in as commercial. You were saying it seems like it's going to be coming, and this is an area that I wouldn't have an issue with if it was built out commercial. So I know how I'm going to vote on it. I just need to know if there's additional comments or questions from the commissioners, or I'll look for a motion when you're ready to make one, and we can move on from this item.
I guess my biggest reservation really is neighborhood commercial the best for that, or should it be a different? I mean,
I'd rather see it like a neighborhood commercial, something lower, but I mean, I don't know. I realize that I personally was all in favor for the one on the other side of Nichols Peak, and I thought that was a good location for it. This one, I'd hate to see another gas station there.
well,
You know what I'm saying? That's
I
not
don't think
something
you'll
that.
see one there.
What's
But,
that?
I think
But they're allowed in C1, aren't they? Oh, they're not? No. That makes it a lot better than the neighborhood commercial with the C1.
All right, who wants to take a shot?
I'll take a stab. This Shill, this doesn't go to city council, or it does? It does?
Yeah.
I would move that we approve, let's see, that the planning commission recommend approval for G-23-05 to amend the general planned land use map from the current low-density residential to the proposed neighborhood commercial designation, and send that forward to the city council.
I've got it first. Do I have a second for the motion?
This Commissioner Tupou, I will second that.
So I've got a motion by Commissioner Shield. I've got a second by Commissioner Tupou. Individual voting, Commissioner Bullock.
I'm an A. I want to see better general plan than spot milling it.
Commissioner Anderson?
I'm an A for the same reason.
Commissioner Shield?
Aye.
Commissioner Tupou?
Aye.
I'm Commissioner Hanson. I'm an aye as well. The motion passes 3-2. We'll send this to City Council with our recommendation for approval. I'd also like to add, just for the minutes, that I think as a growing concern from the commission here, that we encourage the City Council to try to take a look at updating the city plan sooner than later, or that's something maybe after this election cycle that we can get on the books, so we don't have a continuance of more and more projects like this. I appreciate if you guys take a look at that consideration. Item number 5A, this is a preliminary plat. This is also a public hearing for consideration and recommendation to the City Council for Desert Ridge Estates Phases 1 and 2. It's a preliminary plat located approximately Florence Drive and Desert Cactus Drive. The applicant is Civil Science. I'll turn the time over to staff for their report.
The applicant is requesting approval. Let me update the maps. Give me just 1 second. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the Desert Ridge Estates Phase 1 and 2 subdivision located at approximately Desert Cactus Drive and Florence Drive. As seen in the exhibit, Florence Drive separates the townhome portion of the development from the single-family homes. This application that we're hearing tonight does not include any of the townhome development that is west of Florence Drive. I just want to clarify where this arrow is pointing. We're not discussing any of that this evening. Everything to the east of it. Regarding the townhome development, the applicant has the option to work with the adjacent landowner, Bella Vista Phase 4, and may be making adjustment to the layout of the townhome development. The applicant will need to resubmit their application for the preliminary plat for this portion of the development. This application is for Desert Ridge Estates Phase 1 and 2 and includes the full build-out of Florence Drive. Desert Ridge Estates Phase 1 and 2 is proposing 72 lots on an area covering approximately 18.68 acres. The zoning designation at this location is Planned Unit Development Residential. The surrounding zoning is Planned Unit Development Residential to the north, east, and west, and open space to the south. The applicant met with the Hillside Committee on January 20th of 2022, again on November 29th, 2022, and again on March 30th of 2023, and the applicant has satisfied all of the Hillside Committee concerns. On March 30th, 2023, the Hillside Committee made a motion to recommend approval of the Desert Ridge Estates Phase 1 and 2 subdivision, and I have attached those minutes to your report. The applicant has shown lots 232 and 232 through 235 regraded to reduce hillside cutting and has incorporated rock walls behind lots 219 through 233, with these rock walls being built to match the development to the west and shall be painted to blend into the hillside, along with all disturbed areas in this location being mitigated, with there being no disturb fences installed as shown on the exhibit to ensure that no disturbance takes place beyond the disturbance line. Staff has added conditions to this report to address the above Hillside Committee concerns. The proposed subdivision conforms to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements and other city ordinances as it relates to this location. Staff has reviewed the request and recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plat as outlined. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for the Desert Ridge Estates Phase 1 and 2 subdivision onto the City Council based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions as seen in your report. We have the standard 12 conditions in the report that you can see, and I would like to read these remaining conditions. If that's okay, we can go over those, just make it known for the record. Conditions number 13, it states lots 232, 233, 234, and 235. Where my cursor's bouncing, shall be graded as shown in the exhibit to meet slope stability standards and reduce hillside cutting. A slope stability certificate report for these lots shall be submitted to the planning and zoning with final plat applications showing compliance. Condition 14 states, prior to final plat application, a compliance certificate for all of the rockery walls shall be submitted to planning and zoning showing they have been built per design and meet compaction requirements. Condition 15, a no disturbance fence shall be installed as shown in the exhibit behind lots 215 through 236 and 135 and 136 to ensure this open area remains undisturbed. This no disturbance fence shall be maintained, monitored, and strictly enforced throughout the construction of this site. Condition 16, a no disturbance fence shall be installed on the west end of Florence Drive. So that's this blue line here, the west end of Florence Drive. Running north to south all along this development and tying into the no disturb fence south on lots 215 to ensure the hillside area between Florence Drive and Bella Vista Drive remains undisturbed. This no disturbance fence shall be maintained, monitored, and strictly enforced throughout construction on this site. Condition 17, prior to final plat application, all of the grading disturbance areas, I'll pull it up here on the map. All of the grading disturbance areas, which is the purple shading identified in the open space area, shall be restored with rockery walls and planted hydro-seeded material that is native to the area. There shall be no hillside scarring visible, and all restoration efforts shall be complete prior to final plat application. And lastly, condition 18, bonding for the rockery walls, landscaping, revegetation, mitigation, restoration efforts behind lots 215 through 236 and 135 and 136 shall be approved by Public Works in conjunction with construction drawing submittal. Construction shall not start, nor any dirt be moved until such bonding is in place. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thanks, Eldon. On the project flow card that we have with the green and red indication, the very last one, administrative, is left empty. Is there a reason for that, or did it not apply, or is it red? It says applicant is scheduled meeting with manager red to move forward without staff support. Could you clarify that for me?
Dad, were you in on that meeting?
I just want to make sure that we do have staff support and that that's not a red.
We do. The applicant met with city manager and discussed the project. And the reason why the townhome portion is not included in this application was worked out in that meeting. So they pulled that out of the project and given the green light to move the project forward.
Okay, so we
Thad,
do
do you have
have,
any additional insight on that?
There's a lot of discussion. There was so the geotech engineers have discovered what they call a subsurface ancient landslide, which sounds probably scarier than it is, but essentially under the ground, their soil tests show that the strata of soil layers appear to have slipped and slid out a really long time ago. And so there's been a lot of ideas from the applicant and engineers of what and how to do that, and how does that influence whatever work they want to do there. That area also, everybody agrees though that whatever happens on the surface will also need to deal with that same ancient landslide situation under the ground. And so while the project did not have approval building the townhome project, they came, we met, and the discussion was essentially they'll pull that, and someday when the surface is ready to go, this area and the surface can be studied and prepared and proposed together. And so it has staff approval as presented today, but there's that subterranean ancient landslide, then the fact that the side and the mesa top both need to be planned in conjunction. If we went ahead and imposed a whole bunch of restrictions on this project without making the top observe the same things, we're still gonna have a problem. And so because both of those need to essentially be planned in conjunction, the applicant chose to withdraw that portion of the proposal. And that satisfied staff's concern. So the reason for opposition initially is not there anymore.
okay, because Eldon, there was a lot of stuff that you read in there that we don't necessarily hear or see. We get a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and I just wanted to make sure we're certain that the staff is on board with whatever we're seeing tonight, because a lot of that, there's no way we're going to process that in the meeting. So as long as it's been vetted and you guys are okay with it, I think that helps us, or at least me, understand where we're at on this. Commissioners, any questions or comments for staff?
So this is Commissioner Mitchell. So that, my understanding is, so the concerns about the soil were only in this area where the pink is circled, or were there more concerns on the area that's in with the application?
The area to the east largely is, the opinion of the geotechnical folks is that it will not be affected by the subterranean ancient landslide. The area to the south of the pink circle, that's really the mesa of Bella Vista, it's of the opinion that it is affected by that. And so that's why those two were essentially linked, and that we wanted the pink circle to not go any further until the surface above it is also planned in conjunction. But you are, to answer your question, the areas to the east, it's the opinion of the engineers and geotechs that it doesn't need to mitigate that ancient landslide like the other side would. And mitigation is things like, heavy restriction on application of waters, right? A lot of engineering and planning if they're doing any removal or replacement of land or of soils and fills or any retention. The geotechs have long lists of technical things that need to be accomplished on that side so that ancient landslide doesn't move someday.
So another question that I had as I read through all the document, and there's, like Commissioner Hanson said, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of professionals that look like they've come together and discussed certain things. So what liability does the city hold on a failed subdivision? Like, say everybody tries to do their thing and the engineers missed it and it goes forward and it fails. What does that bring upon the city?
That's a very good question, and it's relevant in this state. Draper City had some houses fall off a slope in their city this spring when things were really wet, and cities have very little liability for construction activities that the city permits or authorizes that fail. some lawsuits have been brought that said, well, your inspector inspected whether we used the right outlets. Well, the courts have not found cities to be liable for that either. Courts have said that was a governmental function. They were trying to just make sure they were meeting building code. They weren't building, they weren't the ones that actually, caused the failure. And so our liability on authorizing uses is quite low, even if those uses get built and fail. Because really we're it's a use decision, not a functionality or a fitness decision. Do cities sometimes get sued when houses fall off the ridge in Draper? Yeah. I think Draper City will be involved in that lawsuit if there is one. Cities also have governmental immunity, and they usually get dismissed pretty quickly on those type of claims because state law says governments who are in the role of permitting and administering the state's land use policies on zoning and use are immune if they're performing a governmental function.
Commissioners, before we get too deep into this, can I review all the pages? There was a lot of information discussed in the hillside, and I want to be clear as to what this plan is showing. So I'll start from the beginning, scroll through these, and so again, area not included is circled in the pink.
Sorry, Alan, when did the area in pink get excluded? Was that just today, prior to the meeting, or
It was about 2 weeks ago.
our packets that we received don't show those being pulled? Sorry, I was just curious.
Correct. Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago. So this shows the same views. This will show the percentage hillside as to how steep the slopes are in that area. The darker green areas are a little bit steeper. The white are flat. So these dark lines show retaining walls on all of the lots with pad elevations. This slide doesn't apply. This is a cross section of the different lots, looking kind of east to west, west to east. Rockery wall details. This is looking from Telegraph. This first row is already in all along this roadway here. And again, none of these townhomes are being proposed. This is the area that is not included. So looking from the back side, Sullivan Park. There's a red approximate disturbance line, which is where the fence will be required to not disturb anything below that red line. This is the proposed development. The green is the open space. That dark purple line is the do not disturb fence that will be monitored and enforced. The brown area will be the mitigation restoration efforts behind 215 all the way over to 236. This details that the brown area to receive 4 inches of topsoil and hydroseed. They've also incorporated black basalt boulders salvaged from the site to blend in with the existing rock there, and they've tiered them as well. There is a note that says all single-family lots to be landscaped and irrigated, and refer to the landscape plan for this. They are planning to use black basalt rock and paint it, make sure it blends in with the existing development. This one does not apply, as well as this one. And that concludes all the exhibits. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
This Commissioner Tupou, it just seems like there's a lot of units to be serviced by those 2 outlets.
A lot of what?
Units. It would really stress those 2 outlets, the roads. Mm-hmm.
Eldon, does the road, oh shoot, I don't know what road it is. Does it connect with the road coming off of Bella Vista at the top now that was started a long time ago?
This development will not tie into finished roadway up top.
It will not.
It'll stub into future Bella Vista Phase 4, which
Okay.
would then finish that access off.
The road up to Bella Vista now, is that phase 4? So it won't tie into this. It's going to be a different tie-in? Like by 215, lot 215?
Correct, yeah. I'll pull up the maps here. Better illustrate.
With that being said, it sounds like Bella Vista will have a new road that's going to be built in phase 4 that will tie into this, as opposed to the one that we see up there now.
Yeah, I'm circling Florence Drive, the wording. This will remain unpaved. Their development will stop somewhere in here. Their stubbed roadway.
But eventually, will that connect? And will there be a gate there or something for Bella Vista people?
When that phase develops, it's required to connect.
Okay.
That actual aerial picture helps you kind of see the different topography between the 2 areas, and you'll see the one that's left and northerly of Florence Drive is the one that they removed so that staff's opposition would be withdrawn. To the right, it's flatter, the contours are softer, and the geotechs even say the soils are a little different over there. And so that's what you're seeing today is the application for the east or to the right of Florence Drive. One thing this developer has also done is created another access road to Telegraph. You don't see it in that aerial, but they've obtained and dedicated to the city and improved. Is it 1100 East, Eldon? 1100 East Road that goes from Telegraph due south between the the storage, the RV storage, and then the other housing there into this development as well.
This is kind of relevant, but the piece that's taken out today, is it possible that that never is able to be mitigated to the point that they can build on it, where that would remain as is?
Everything's possible. I'll say that as it stood this week and last week with staff's opposition, we didn't feel like it was possible yet.
Okay, and I'm curious because you've been on council before and all this in the past, that I'm wondering, when Bella Vista was developed, did the geotechs say kind of, well, I guess it doesn't apply.
The geotechs did not notice this at the time, and so what's actually been constructed on Bella Vista was applied and approved without knowledge of what the geotechs have now found.
Okay.
Mostly that's because the industry practice is getting more and more precise. You know, the more modern things get and the bigger our area gets. So there were codes. There's codes today that didn't exist then, and so I think the main reason why that's known is we just have different standards than we did, 15 years ago on geotechnical things.
Kind of as a side note, if and when phase 4 of Bella Vista comes, nothing else, let's say the pink area is not built on, does it affect Bella Vista phase 4 because it's up higher than this, and that, all the weight's coming down, right?
So now that the city knows about this geotechnical study, Bella Vista phase 4 is absolutely going to need to, if they wish to develop, are going to need to develop in a way that satisfies this geotechnical concern.
Okay.
Essentially, if the way we look at it is Bella Vista phase 4 will be building and placing impact at the very highest point of this, historic, I shouldn't say historic, what's the word? Ancient. I don't know how a landside can be ancient, but it is.
Yeah.
And so you'd be putting impact at the very top, which in theory, transfers new risk at the toe and along the slope. And so, we absolutely interpret phase 4 Bella Vista to need to address that as well.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions you'd like to ask or comments before I open this up to the public hearing? All right, at this time, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing for item number 5A. If any of you would like to speak to this particular item, please come forward and state your name for the record. And if possible, try to keep your comments under 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioner. My name is Terry Keefe. I live at 480 East Sienna Drive in Washington. I just have a couple of questions on the single-family lots in Phase 1 and 2. I can't read what the name of those streets are. They connect to Florence Drive, is that correct? Okay, and then the second row of townhomes between Bella Vista and Florence, that's been approved, but the third level has not been. Is that correct also?
Where that arrow is pointing
Okay, thank you.
has not been approved.
Okay, how about the road though, the north side of that road?
Nothing in that circled area has been approved.
Okay, thank you. So how far will Florence Drive proceed south? Will it go all the way to lot, I guess it would have to, is it 516, 515?
215?
215. Okay. All right. And the only other question I have, with the number of houses that are coming in, I assume construction on this would start fairly rapidly because they're about built out on the townhomes on Desert Cactus. When is the city planning on a traffic light on Telegraph, and is it still planned for 1100 East or Bella Vista?
So the time element we impose on applications is we say you got to meaningfully begin within 18 months. This developer and the owners there have been fairly robust in getting after it, and so we would expect that trend continue, but we don't have any requirement that they commence at a certain time. I do know that warrants have been met at Bella Vista and Telegraph for a light. John, is that correct?
Yeah,
All right, that's the only questions I had. Thank you.
You ask about the road names, sir? Did you ask about the road names? Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll turn the time, Commissioners, back over to you for any questions or comments. The only comment I have is, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of effort and additional meetings that have taken place with, like Commissioner Mitchell was saying, with a lot of professionals in this area. This is a big deal. It has to do with sight lines, has to do with ridge lines, has to do with all kinds of things that I certainly don't propose to be an expert at by any means. And so I'm certainly relying on that the city is doing everything necessary to take care of this, and council will pay extra attention to this, because as all projects can be potential problems, this certainly does not any different from that. So I just encourage the city to continue to be diligent on everything they know to be right in the professional sense of getting this correct. But I don't have any issues or any additional comments outside of that.
I just have a question for the developer, actually.
Please state your name for the record.
James Jessup.
So my only question would be, and I know this is technically unrelated to this application, but has the erosion mitigation that we talked about last time you were here been taken care of to the west of here?
On the other side of Bella Vista Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah, the grading's being done on those lots right now. So we're shooting to have final plat, which entails all the grading and all of that done. I would say 4 weeks, maybe.
So my main concern would just be, some sort of vegetation or riprap or something on the hillside.
We actually rock walled it.
Or rock wall, even better.
Really
Sure.
well. I think it turned out really good. You don't see any scarring on the hillside.
I'm talking about between you and the older community to the north of you, the mobile fence that they had all the gutters dumping onto your spot.
I think which the hillside going down along there.
Yeah, we're near your detention
You
basin.
mean along the basin there?
Yeah,
So,
between the basin and their wall. Yeah, right there.
We've cleaned it out enough to where it flows well, and they've pulled off their rain gutters. So the plan is as soon as the crews get done with phase 2, then they go down there and clean out the rest of that. And I've been in contact with Lynn, who is the HOA president, I think.
I just want to make sure, because they needed to take their water out, but I just wanted to make sure that was part of our approval on that other project you had, was that we either erosion. I just want to make sure that get done.
All drainage ditches are created right now to flow to the ponds. So
Okay.
those are all graded already right now.
Okay.
That it?
Cool, thanks. Any other questions or concerns? If not, I'll look for a motion on item 5.
I'll make a motion. This Commissioner Bullock, I make a motion to recommend approval of preliminary plat for Desert Ridge Estates Phase 1 and 2 onto the City Council based on the 2 findings and 18 conditions.
Commissioner Anderson, I second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bullock. I have a second by Commissioner Anderson. Individual voting: Bullock,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Shield,
Aye.
Tupo.
Aye.
I'm Hanson. I'm an aye as well. The motion passes. We'll send that to City Council with our recommendation for approval. Move on to item number 6A. This is a public hearing for consideration for approval of a conditional use permit, C-2308, to modify equipment on an existing communications tower located at 480 East, 730 North. The applicant is Powder River Development, and I'll turn the time over to staff for their report.
Thank you, Commissioners. The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to modify the existing cell tower located at approximately 480 East, 730 North. The applicant is proposing the addition of a microwave antenna / radio, fiber cable, Cat5 cable, and control cable. No other changes are being made at this time. The proposed new equipment and cables will be located on and or in the existing pole. The zoning designation at this location is administrative professional. The surrounding zoning is open space to the north, C3 to the east, and R16 to the south and west. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve C-23-08, allowing modifications to be made to the existing cell tower as shown in the exhibits with the findings and conditions outlined below. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
All right, Commissioners, I'll open the floor for any questions.
We've already had a number of these just like this.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
They're not making it any taller, correct? It's the same height.
That is correct.
They're adding apparatus up there essentially. There is one detail on this one that I don't think is critical, but I think it's good for just public awareness in this meeting. The lease contract for this pole, this one is situated on city land and the city owns the lease. And it does call for the city to have the ability to relocate that because there's a future frontage road planned. We'll come right down through that area and Commissioner Mitchell and I's neighborhood's old backyard. But there's still a transportation plan for a frontage road to come from there, and it goes right through the site of that pole. And so the applicant's aware of that. They're making upgrades with awareness of that. The city doesn't have a plan to fund that road in the near short-term future anyway, but it is a road that's planned. It would cause a relocation of that pole as well as removal of some of the older Parks Department buildings that have been used there. It would connect 300 East.
This is Commissioner Anderson. The only thing I would say is that all the other ones like this that we have done, and I know maybe it's just verbiage, but we'd had a discussion previously that the city nor the Planning Commission is qualified to say, finding number 2, that it's not detrimental to anybody's health, that's the purview of the federal government. And so in all the other ones, we struck the word health out of that, just saying that we're not like certifying any such thing.
How do we get them to look like a palm tree or a pine tree? I drive around all over and I see palm trees and palms.
On the relocation,
Yeah,
when it's relocated.
I like them.
Do you like those pine trees? You think those look good?
I think it looks better than this.
That's fair.
Lipstick on a pig.
Just a thought.
All right, I'll look for a motion if there, I'm sorry. I've got to open this to a public hearing. Is there anybody here I will go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this particular item? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn it back over to Commissioners for any additional comments or a motion on this particular item, and it is for a conditional use permit that does not go to City Council.
So Commissioner Anderson, I'll make a motion to recommend approval to approve C-23-08, request for conditional use permit to modify the existing cell tower located at approximately 480 East and 730 North with the 4 findings and 1 condition, and striking the word health from finding number 2.
Commissioner Tupou, I second that.
Got a motion by Anderson, second by Tupou. Individual voting, Bullock,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Shield,
Aye.
Tupou.
Aye.
I'm Hanson. I'm an aye as well. That conditional use permit has been granted. Move to item number 6B. This is a public hearing as well for consideration for approval of a conditional use permit C2309, a storage unit facility located at Lot 32 of Sunrise Valley Industrial Subdivision and approximately at Warehouse Drive and Smelter Drive. The applicant is American Land Consulting. I'll turn the time over to Eldon for staff report.
The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit for a reduction in the side yard setback on an interior lot line from the required 10-foot to a 0-foot setback. The project is located at 68 South and Warehouse Drive. The new building will be required to meet the standards as outlined in the city-adopted building and fire codes. Staff feels that if these can be met, then the request should be granted for the proposed new industrial development and the reduced side yard setback. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve C-23-09, allowing for a reduction of the side yard setback as shown in the exhibit to a 0-foot setback based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions as seen in your report. And just to clarify where these red storage units are, this is where they're asking for a 0 setback line. All the others, the front, have street frontage and will be required to meet the 20-foot setback with the landscape strip there. The blue on their map is just a different type of unit. And same with the lighter tan, the green, just a different unit.
Is the red already constructed?
No, nothing's been constructed. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have at this time.
Commissioners, any questions initially before I open this up for a public hearing?
So what's the construction? Do we know what that back wall is? Is it block wall
Which back are you referring to?
on that lot 31?
Up the back up to Country Way or?
Where the red's going to butt up against? Yeah.
Lot line.
They'll need to meet the fire requirements. I would defer to the applicant to specify how they're going to do that.
This is Commissioner Anderson, I think if we're going to allow a 0 lot line there, then it needs to be made out of block, even if it's just that one, so it appears like a block wall. I mean, that'd be really, odd to have a bunch of, siding buildings right there on your, as the wall between property lines.
Yeah,
Maybe they're already planning, I don't know, but I think we should.
I think as long as it's block, it's just like a fence on that type of use, and I think it's fine.
This is Commissioner Minto. I was just curious if the law owner of 31 is here. If he has any concerns with...
He's here.
I know him.
Oh, okay.
He didn't admit he knew you, though. That's what we're worried about.
Yeah, it's not me.
Well, I'm going to go and open this up to the public hearing. Looks like there might be somebody here in the audience who wants to speak to this particular item. Please come forward and state your name for the record, if you would like to. And nobody would like to. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back over to commissioners at this time. Did you say you are the owner of that lot next door?
No, I'm the owner of 32, the project.
Oh, the project itself. Okay. Do you mind coming forward, actually? I know I have a question for you. One of the and please state your name for the record.
Sure. Lionel Gracia.
Thank you. What is there now on that lot line where the red would butt up against, where these storage units would back up to? Is there anything there now?
Those are 2 vacant lots right now. There's nothing constructed on those 2 lots.
Okay. How do you feel about what was said earlier about having a block wall put in there to separate?
Well, all of the buildings are metal buildings, so you're going to have a 14-foot steel building
backing into Lot 31. So I don't see a need for an additional block wall in that case.
Well, we're not saying an additional block wall, we're saying make the back wall of those units out of block. Just so that's part of the structure, that way it looks, so it doesn't look like you just have a metal building right on the property line.
So all of the buildings that are on the street side will have additional structure of some kind, either a stucco or wainscot rock. We've already discussed that with Eldon. The one adjacent to 31 didn't see a need to because that was not going to be facing the street. So that was going to be just a steel building. The rest of it will be some kind of a different material of some kind to make it look a little more pleasing to the eye.
It's not, this is Commissioner Anderson, it's not necessarily a visual thing. It just looks bad to have, that be the metal siding be the fence between the property lines. And the block wall is going to have better fire protection against, Lot 31 and so forth. You can still do the whole thing out of the materials you have, but just make that back wall out of block. And it's going to be similar cost to making it out of metal just for that one back wall.
But how tall did you say the units are going to be?
That particular wall is going to be 14 feet. Those are tall units because they're more like for boat storage. That's, or similar. So those are 12 by 30 feet long and will be a 14-foot high wall. So
we don't want a 14-foot wall, high block wall, if I understand.
No.
Or do 6 foot and then do siding on top of it.
I don't personally see the point in it. It's an industrial area. We made a push to put these in industrial areas because they are going to be out of metal buildings, and it does cost a lot more to put a block wall up versus to metal side that. That's why we have all these metal buildings going on out there. They're a lot cheaper than the block walls. It'll get built faster. It'll go faster. The zero lot line, I think that, whatever the other neighbor wants to do, it'll cause an issue later, but because he'll have to have a setback, or if he can't, he'll have to go right up next to it. That's my only concern with it, is the other neighbor now has a setback where these guys don't, and he can't go zero lot line now. So, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. I'd be okay with a couple foot setback just so that the other guy can get into his side, because he's the one giving up all the property now, not him, with the setback.
Yeah, all the burden for
one,
fire separation is now going to be on 31.
Right. That's my only concern, because I know that they're storage units and they're not supposed to have flammable liquids stored in them, but Bear River proved us wrong on that one because they all burnt down. So, my thing is I just think that there needs to be enough room to get a fire engine back through there, or some way to fire protection. If fire department's okay with it, without putting the burden onto the other property owner, then I'm okay with it. Is my opinion.
Matt, what do you think? Matt Liu,
American Land. I think all great points. I think on the fire question, obviously it has to be built according to code. Whether there's a firewall in between that separates the lot line, so I think that'll be met just by pure fire code and building codes. I think we are open to your advice, your counsel. It is proposed to be a 14-foot wall as far as the back wall of those reds, so it's a little bit taller, and I think your tallest you can do with a block wall will be about 6 foot, I believe. 5.5, 6 foot.
You got to engineer anything above that, yeah. So if you wanted to go, say, an 8-foot block wall, you'd need to get it engineered and have plans with it for the footings and all that stuff.
That's not, yeah.
The cost is going to be in the footing if you go 14 feet high. That's where your cost is. If it were the same, your metal and your block are not going to be that much different, but your footing is going to be a lot different with that tall of a wall.
Most of the buildings in this industrial, of course, are all steel buildings in that particular project.
But they're not lot line, zero lot line.
Correct.
So I think what we're asking is to go up 6 feet with block and above that, finish with metal. I think that'd be fine. Other than, I think you're impeding the other guy because he's going to have an easement for your safetiness. He won't be able to use that side of his property.
This is Commissioner Mitchell. I agree with this too, with the block, because the neighbor, if he dings the back of the metal's gonna it's gonna dent, it's gonna cave. Block will give you a little bit more strength so that if the neighbor does bump it, run into it or whatever, you've got some barrier there. There's got to be something to protect the neighbor, I think.
Just a question for Eldon and possibly the attorney. On the zero lot line, if we're looking at the 6 foot as a CMU block, and then we finish with, whatever the steel is, the potential neighbor on 31, how would he or she handle their development? Could they go up too? Is there going to be a dead space in between, or there's still a setback from that proposed zero lot line?
So if you're asking for a zero lot line, they get to put their oil reservoir right next to your storage shed too, right? Like they get a zero lot line just like you do. And so I think that it comes with positives for both owner, but also nothing creates good fights like fence lines, right? And so I think that putting 14-foot metal walls on a zero lot line is probably going to be something that you end up regretting, because you're in an industrial area, it's industrial use. You could have a batching plant. Now you could have any industrial use within a 1/4 inch of the outside wall of your storage units. And so if I were you, I would seek to buffer myself a little bit from whatever other industrial use is allowed under our code, which I get it that we put storage units there for a reason, but they're not heavy industrial like you're going to see. You could see a guy raising, big old heavy concrete forms above those things every single day, right? Like the nature of industrial uses on a zero lot line, you guys are the small fish in that pond, and I would want to create some space for myself if I was you.
Appreciate the insight. Questions? Other thoughts? Ideas?
Mr. Commissioner Anderson, one other issue with a zero lot line is, at least just so you're thinking of, is you can't let rainwater run off onto lot 31. I mean, you have to make sure you've mitigated that and it runs forward and into some drainage and so
The
forth.
building drains towards the inside of the project. Yeah. And they all have rain gutters going to the detention pond in the back and in the front where we have it designated already.
I want to ask a point of clarification on the vacant lot. Did we establish it's 31, or is that what number it is?
Yeah, 31.
Right here? Yep. They have a setback until they come in and ask for a zero lot line. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a standard setback. You're going to have a hard time telling them no when you've allowed this to happen on that boundary, right?
You would expect to see them come in and want a zero lot line as well, and then they're right up to each other?
Yeah.
My thing on the zero lot line is okay, I'm in my shop's is heavy industrial, and I'm picking up steel beams and swinging them over my neighbor's fence all the time. It happens. I mean, I'm next to a junkyard, so I'm not going to hurt anything. Or they're caught on fire. If I'd had a zero lot line, if they put a junkyard out there and something catches on fire, it's going to burn that one down. I mean, we have fires quite often.
It's like shared walls. That Bullfrog Spa's fire, it had more financial impact on the carpet store next door, who lost all of their inventory, right? I won't say more financial impact, but it was big. The smoke and its impact was a lot heavier on the person that they shared a wall with, even though it wasn't their fire. And so there's just, I think, industrial uses that have a zero lot line. You just, and if you drop a steel beam on your neighbor, you're responsible, right? But it's still an impact. It's still a neighborly frustration. So absolutely is. I just think metal buildings have everything to lose in a zero lot line scenario, right? I think that you guys are.
It's a 10-foot setback you're asking for to be removed, correct?
Correct.
Is it, so you,
I still think there's room to figure it out. I wouldn't go, I'd go 8, maybe give them 8 feet, but not 0. That's my opinion. I think that it's going to cause issues like, they can store whatever they want on lot lines. They don't have to build a building there, but the neighbor can store anything he wants over there up against that. I mean, the 0 lot line worries me when I don't know what's going in on the lot next to it.
We don't love vacant areas in interior boundaries between industrial, but putting structures right on the lot line also has got its challenges. And so that I think that's the challenge here, is you're putting your structural wall on the lot line, and the neighbor can, put a lot of stuff right next to that I would have concerns if I was you.
are you doing it so you can get more units in there ultimately? I mean,
I guess, so go ahead.
Sorry, the size of the unit,
Yeah.
to make them 30 feet instead of 20 feet, so yeah, to make them a little larger.
So the reds would initially, if that goes away, it would be like the golds on the front side as far as the size. And
If
then-
you went to,
and
if
then
you
the-
had like a 5-foot, setback, you could still get a majority of boats in there.
8, 5 to 3.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, I mean, most of your bolts around are going to be around 24 feet in length. I mean, if you went, 5 feet or 4 feet, something is better than nothing, and you put a block wall in there. I just,
So a
I
block
don't know.
wall right on the lot line would be satisfactory? Is that an option?
I mean, the
I
real
don't
concern
think
is
so. I
we
think
don't
we're
want to
still-
have arguments between you and 31, and we're trying to spare heartache there, in the future is what we're trying to, with uses. That's the main thing.
And again, I think they're all great suggestions and direction. The only concern is kind of like with the city attorney, whether it's, 3 foot, 10 foot, 5 foot, just that space in between the properties might be hard for maintenance or trash or anything to gather. So just got to try and figure out if there's a better way to handle that. But I do appreciate the thoughts.
I think a block on 0 lot line's fine with me.
It would serve as a wall.
Right.
Go 6 foot and then finish. I guess that can be a condition.
But if you did that, then it goes back to your point, Pete, right? About you're swinging steel beams over your neighbor's lot. I mean, whatever they're doing.
A block wall would
you
just
go
put a
right
hole in
through
it.
Put a hole in it.
A block wall's gonna, if somebody hits it, they're gonna hit it. Somebody hits it, they're gonna hit it. Plain and simple. Whether it's a block wall or a steel building, the steel building's easier to replace than the block wall. You just pull the panel off and put a new one back on. I do it all. Unfortunately, we do it quite often at our shop.
We hope that our neighbor would be pretty careful, but
Well,
things
yeah,
happen.
I'm not tearing up the neighbors, I'm tearing
Yeah.
up my own, but the 0 lot line makes me nervous for what happens next. I feel like if the other neighbors have something out there that's flammable, if they're storing their fuel tanks or whatever next to it, and say there is a fire in one of yours, there's no way to get in to fight it from the rear unless they go through the other neighbors. So therefore, he has the burden basically to let someone in there to get to it. I know they can come in from the interior, but did the fire department okay with the 0 lot line?
I believe so.
So with that being said, there's a reason there's setbacks, obvious. And some of the things, even though they're worst case scenarios, possibly it's possible, and that's why there's a setback. I gotta be honest, guys, I want you to talk me into this, but I'm going the other way, going, no, there needs to be a setback. And that's where I'm at personally. It sounds, from what I heard Thad say, there's some benefits to it, but that also comes with some negatives to it. That's where I'm at. I'd rather err on the side of caution than I would anything else, but.
I would worry about, okay, if I were to rent one of those units and put a boat in it, if that's the exterior and it's just metal siding, people can come in there with, and cut a hole in the wall and steal your stuff. I have a boat in a storage unit like this, but the back wall is solid block all the way up 14 feet. And the rest of it's metal, but the exterior property line wall is all block.
So just to clarify, the green buildings are designated for both. Those are the larger units. The other red ones or pink ones are not quite, sorry, they're a little bit smaller, but we still want to maximize our square footage. Obviously, we're trying to do that. And if there is I guess there is a conditional use permit for a setback, so why have it if it's not allowed? I mean, what's the purpose? I mean, if that is something that we can apply for, why isn't?
Well, it's on a case-by-case basis, depending on the circumstances. I mean, that's what we're talking about, but.
So just because you can apply for it doesn't mean you qualify for it, right? The city has a broad range of things you can apply for, but there needs to be a body that determines whether it's appropriate. And so I think what you see them trying to figure out is,
Right, sure.
is a zero lot line appropriate for an industrial lot?
Because if we had the setbacks, if you met the setbacks, this wouldn't even come to us, because this is a permitted use in an industrial area. You wouldn't even be here. So, I mean,
I guess something else to think about too is you let one, it makes it very difficult to enforce the others. And how many lots are in this industrial environment?
I think it's just these two. I'm not sure. No, I'm just kidding.
The only thing I think is on a storage unit like this, and where it's a lot of building, and if you have a 5 foot or a 10 foot, whatever it is between that building and the fence, it's going to be a rat hole. And so it's just going to be full of weeds, and it's a common area that's going to constantly need to be picked up with the wind and everything. So,
but that's the way it is on all setbacks. I mean,
I don't disagree, but if it's that case, then they'll make it a little bit bigger so that they can drive around the building. This, they're not going to drive around the building.
Chairman, sorry.
Yeah, but that's like saying I should be able to put my house on the lot line so I don't have to mow my lawn. Right? Come on.
I want to live in your subdivision.
Chairman, Chief Evans, the fire chief, is available online if any of the commissioners wish to question him about it. Awesome. I think there's a question as to whether fire had reviewed this.
Chief Evans, do you have some comments on this? Assuming you're hearing what we're saying, we'd love to hear your input on our discussion.
I just might have told a lie.
Uh-oh. Well, if he comes on, we're interested.
I'm looking at Melody's texting here, and so I'll.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Could you hear us?
Oh, perfect. I could hear you. I can hear you all just fine. So sorry for that. You would think by now we'd know how to unmute ourselves on these calls. As far as lot lines and working through that process, as you move closer to the lot line, so as you go under that 10 feet, the requirements start to get higher at how you can build that building. So as was suggested, if you go to a 0 lot line, they can't just put a tin wall in there. It has to be a fire rated wall. So if you build on the lot line, it would require a 1 hour fire separated wall. So they would have to build that building different, at least along the wall that sits on the lot line. So when Mr. Liu had the conversation or mentioned that they would have to build it in accordance with the code does allow that. It just increases the requirements of how they build it.
So fire, you don't care one way or the other as long as they meet the code that the city has, correct?
That's really been our stance with all of it. Of course, that's why we have the codes, and the state of Utah has adopted the International Fire Code, and that's all we've ever asked of anyone is just to meet the code. And there's lots of ways to meet the code. And so that's always been what we've asked is as long as they can meet the code, then we've been okay with that.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions for the fire chief while we have him? All right, thanks, chief. Appreciate it.
You bet.
So let me ask this, and this is for commissioners or whoever. Are we placing a detriment on the vacant lot next to this by doing this? Is it making his world harder, the guy that's there?
I think with a block wall, you're not.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion. That's because otherwise you might end up with a chain link fence there, and that's going to be easily damaged, easier damaged than a block.
Yeah.
So I think a block wall's nice, and if they build it out of block wall, I think it's fine.
I tend to
So here's my question for you, because I'm looking at all the UL ratings for 1 hour fire rated walls like this. And unless you're gonna put gypsum, drywall on these things, you need to go to a block wall. I mean, there are some ways to do it, but you're talking drywall on all the walls and a whole bunch of other details that you may not want to do to get that 1 hour fire rating. So I don't know. I've built stuff like this before, and if it were me, I would do the back wall out of block and fill it solid and call it a day.
Did you say you agree?
And I'd make it 14 feet tall.
I was just thinking the neighbor might actually appreciate, because then he can tie his awning into it and use.
Shade, just in case, outdoor workspace.
I'll tell him.
But I would make it 14 feet tall, a block, and fill it solid and call it a day. And then it looks nice and clean, and at least it's stronger if somebody does bump it, and it meets your fire rating. And that's what I would do if I were building it.
Why does that sound so tall to me? 14 feet of a block wall.
That's very tall, yeah.
No?
There's a lot of commercial buildings that are built completely out of CMU walls, like all the case. I mean, it's very common, and they're 20 feet plus.
So it sounds like a block wall, at least for the commission standpoint, is a sticking point on this going one.
And to
way or
get your
the
fire rating, that's the easiest way. You fill the wall with grout and you're done. I mean, it's simple.
Did you guys have any questions for the fire chief while he's on, or for us? But it sounds like that's going to come as a condition on this moving forward.
I do have one question, though. I'm considering acquiring lot 31. Would that change anything if I acquired lot 31? Because I would build a regular industrial building not on the lot line, if that were to happen.
If you combine the lots, then
Couldn't
you can do
just
whatever you want.
combine the lots?
Well,
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, would that requirement go away?
It's this close to under contract, I'll tell you that. But,
Lot 31
He
is,
has to
it
recuse
probably-
himself all of a
I'm
sudden.
sorry.
It would probably change because you could do a lot line adjustment and get your setback.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
If you got
too,
the other one, couldn't he do, if you own both of them, you could do a lot line adjustment
right.
and get whatever you wanted. No one's going to care if you deed that property over. You wouldn't even need to be here for this. If you were doing that, you could just move your lot line and not even come in here for this.
Well, it looks like Commissioner Shield might know more than I do, so I don't know.
Sounds like we're in a line.
That's just what I do, so, I'm sorry.
I guess the thought with the
I should have kept my mouth shut.
acquiring the other lot though is, acquire it to do your building and then turn around and sell it. You haven't solved anything. But if
No.
there's a similar development goes into the same lot on 31, I mean, you can still sell 31 and it become a nuisance for the next buyer.
You were asking about the requirement for the block wall, right?
Yes,
If you bought the other lot?
right, correct.
No, it'd still be there because it'd be on the lot line, I'm assuming. But if I said, like we said, if you moved your property line, then you wouldn't have that problem. You would have your setbacks, and you
Or
wouldn't
if you
need to be
joined the
here.
lots, it wouldn't be an issue either.
Right. You have options, I guess, but for what we're seeing here tonight and what we're giving a recommendation for approval on tonight has to do with just this one. So you can take with that, once it proceeds through the process, what you want. If you end up acquiring the other before, then this all goes out the window and you can handle that differently. I would think you'd combine the two lots and restructure it differently. But as far as tonight, I think we're all under the agreement. Do we have any other issues that we'd like to take up with them about this other than that? Otherwise, it seems like we're in agreement that we can move this on as a recommendation for approval, and you can do with it what you want if you handle the other property. But yeah, it doesn't go to city council. Okay, well, that's right. It's conditional use permit. Okay, thank you both. Appreciate it. So in our motion, it sounds like we need to have mention as a the back wall. Yeah, fire rated. Yeah. Perfect. So I'll look for a motion.
Before you do that, can I bow out of this? Recuse myself.
In case you sell on the other lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I'll make a motion to approve C-23-09, request for a conditional use permit for a storage unit facility side yard setback located at 68 South Warehouse Drive, with the 4 findings by staff, the 8 conditions by staff, and a 9th condition that the 14-foot rear wall of the 0 lot line buildings be made out of a 1-hour fire-rated CMU block wall.
Commissioner Tupou, I second that.
I've got a motion by Commissioner Anderson. I've got a second by Commissioner Tupou. Individual voting, Bullock.
Aye.
Chairman, this is Chief Evans. Can I clarify one thing before you vote on that condition?
Sure.
So the 1 hour separation really only worked for one side of that lot line. So when you talk about that, and this may or may not have any effect on your vote or how you want to structure that, but so if lot 31 decides to build on that lot line and it's a 1 hour separation, they would still have to put a 1 hour there. So he's responsible for 1 hour on his side. If the person that wants to build on lot 31 wants to build, they have to build on a 1 hour separation if they have a 0 lot line, which in effect would mean that if you want to put something down the middle to affect both lots, it has to be a 2 hour rating, if that makes sense.
Yep, we understand that. Thank you, Chief.
So do you need to amend it or no? We just know that, okay. All right, thanks, Chief. So I have a motion by Anderson, a second by Tupou. Individual voting, Bullock was in.
I hesitate, an aye.
What?
Aye.
Aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Mitchell,
I'm going to say nay.
Tupou.
Aye.
I'm Hanson, I'm an aye as well, and Shield is an abstention. So the conditional use permit passes, and there you go. You did it. Yep, thank you, guys. Okay, item number 7A. It's the last item on our agenda this evening. This is a public hearing as well for consideration and recommendation to City Council for amending a portion of the City Code, Title 9, Chapter 8B, Section 6, detached residential R1 zoning, rear yards, 25% accessory building restrictions. We recently did this not too long ago. I'll turn the time over to staff for their report.
A request from a local law firm in the St. George area has been submitted. They are wishing to have the Washington City Code amended for the purpose of adding different language in the modifying regulations of the single-family residential zoning district. The City Code allows for anyone to apply for amendments to the city codes. The applicant has applied for consideration at this time. Specifically, they are proposing the following modifications.
I'll maybe summarize as Eldon's pulling them up. Essentially, their proposal is to remove awnings from city regulation. And so that would include counting them towards the rear yard coverage calculation the city code currently has.
Correct. I wanted to show those on the screen here to make it visible, and that's exactly correct. They are proposing to exclude shade structures from the rear yard 30% requirement, which we just modified. Their changes are in red. So number 5 would read accessory buildings and structures, excluding shade structures as outlined below, located in the rear yard, shall not cover more than 30%. So shade structures would not be required to fit within that 30%. On top of that, a few years prior to this, we amended and incorporated a specific shade structure code, which staff feels good about, that we can rest our shoulders on and keep the open space in the backyards. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. Well, let me first read our recommendation that staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend denial of the proposed language regarding shade structures and awnings, non-limitation of size and area onto the City Council due to the recently already approved modifications to this section of the zoning regulations. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
So is this something that we all went through this together? Is this just something we didn't think about, or is it something that is a bigger issue than we realized? Or what do you guys think about when you first saw this?
When we talked about it, because we asked it, you asked them specifically, you said, you know, because when we were deciding to go to 30%, we were like, what counts towards that 30%? Because we wanted to know, and it was, you know, it was garages or ADU living space, you know, shed, et cetera. Like, really, we're talking about things with footings under and walls and foundation, all this stuff. And you even asked them, I remember, you know, does that include like shade structures and that sort of thing? And it's like, no, that's not included. But the way that it's worded here would include it. But that means that we're like, because we talked about, like, on some of these, if somebody puts in a garage or whatever, and they've used their 30%, what if they're like, hey, I want to put an awning back by my pool or whatever? You know, then suddenly we're like, oh, you can't do that now because you put a garage in. Now, I understand, you know, the comment here by staff that, hey, we don't want to fill the entire backyard with awnings, which would be awfully expensive unless they've got a super teeny lot. But I think I think it should be excluded from our 30% rule, but maybe we limit it by something reasonable, just so they don't fill the whole yard up. I don't know. Maybe it's under a separate category or something, or maybe the combination of shade structures and, you know, detached, you know, buildings or whatever don't exceed, I don't know, 40%, 50%, something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think my intent at the time wasn't to exclude awnings. And I remember talking about it a little bit because I see some around the city, and they're right up against the fence. There's no setback, things like that. And that sticks out of my mind. But if we build a garage in somebody's backyard, they should be able to have an awning on their pool. I don't have a problem with that, right? Do we have a problem? I mean, do you guys have a problem with that when we read through this initially? So the idea, I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that we have to discuss some kind of a stipulation of what would be allowed, because I definitely don't think that we can allow it to just be whatever. As dumb as that might sound, some said something bad. Some person is going to do something silly. Some Thad Sigmiller is going to put an awning the size of his entire backyard, and it's going to look terrible. We're going to go, why did we allow that? But at the same time, I would hate to see us say, oh yeah, you built a barn or a garage or whatever, an ADU in your backyard, but you can't have a shade structure around your pool or your jacuzzi or something like that.
We could also, I mean, like in provision C, you know, by including that in there, we're also, like they've suggested here, we're also regulating it with the same setback requirements as building stuff. So then again, you don't put it right up on the property line or whatever.
Yeah. I don't like seeing that. I really hate it. I want to tear it down every time I see it, which is every single day when I drive by it, this particular one.
The time that I've been here at the city, I've never come across a detached structure and an awning conflicting in the was then 25% or that 30% requirement.
I agree, but I think that's mostly because no one's ever really thought of it. But if we look at the letter of the law, you very easily could conflict. And I think that's why we need to change it, just so there isn't, you know, that possible conflict. So it makes more reasonable sense.
This is Commissioner Tupou. I just think if we're calling it a shade structure, that's different than an awning. So like a carport or a canopy or something, like it could include a lot of things that people would call a shade structure. A gazebo.
Yeah, like there's a lot of variations of these, right? And these companies that build these structures are creative in what they offer. It used to just be you could get a metal shed. Remember those? The 80s, the little metal sheds that would blow over after about 9 years. And now there's a lot of options that really can benefit a backyard. I think that our code as it currently is written codifies this value of backyards aren't completely full of structures. And there's a very noticeable shift in the housing industry where residential lots are smaller, right? Some of that helps with water conservation. Some of that helps with density. And so I think if you really just back up, what this discussion really is are we still trying to defend this idea that rear yards have open space, right? And if you are, you got to look at these and decide how you want to do that. But if you aren't, what's your value for rear yards? What do you want them to be like so that the ordinance and regulation can accomplish that?
It's Commissioner Anderson. I think we should value open space in the backyard, but we should also let people, build shade structures too. I think there's a happy compromise there. We don't have to say, hey, you can fill your whole backyard up with an awning, but we also shouldn't be so restrictive that somebody can't put a pool awning up or whatever just because they build a detached garage or something. I think there's a logical happy medium there.
I just realized this affects me because I have an additional structure in my backyard that's an office. I have a pergola that sits over my jacuzzi, and I'm going to put in a pool in the spring, and I want to be able to put a shade strap, like an awning or some kind of shade over it. So all of a sudden it hit me really hard that I might not be able to do that based on city standard or city code. I'm like, oh, everything's permanent. No. So Eldon, if I understood you correctly, the city staff is opposed to this. Could you talk a little bit about maybe it's just me, but what am I missing in that's something like that in my backyard wouldn't be allowed? Are we trying to stop that from happening as a city, or is it a combination of the size of all those things together and what percentage of that is my backyard that we're trying to limit? I just want to make sure I understood from a real world perspective, my own.
That's a great question. So we have given on the shade structure. A few years back, we incorporated the shade structure section of the code and incorporated that in to allow those. And then most recently upped it to 30% as well. Staff wants to support open space in backyard areas. The way this was presented tonight by the legal firm was removing that out of the requirement, so it could be 100% filled, and staff doesn't support that. We want open space in the backyards. We want to push people out to the trails, the parks, and be recreating in the community, and we're comfortable with how the code sits.
I'm the opposite. I want it to live in my backyard. Like I don't. I'm agreeing. Personally, I agree 100%. I'm opposed to leaving it open to somebody like a Thad Siegmiller to build an awning over their entire backyard. I definitely don't want to leave it that far open. I would think we would all agree with that. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Could it happen? I don't want to even give it a shot because, again, we always go back to that one storage unit that's by the car wash there on Telegraph that takes up more than 50% of their yard. If Drew was here, I'm sure he'd already have said something about it. But not that you wouldn't, Eldon, but he loves to talk about that particular corner. So for me, I don't know the semantics of how it's written. I just want to, as a homeowner, I would say I would speak for many. I want to be able to have that and be okay with it. So I think there needs to be some sort of a percentage. I don't know, because we just went through all this.
So here's the math, okay? It doesn't affect people with half-acre lots or bigger. It doesn't really matter with them. People with a third-acre lot, you've got 1,200 square feet under our 30% ordinance, all right? People with a quarter-acre lot have 600 square feet that they can build, okay? So
it's still pretty big. I don't know how big my lot is.
Well, no, like if you build a garage, if you build an RV garage, it's taking all that square footage with the third acre lot. You know, if you got a quarter acre lot, you're not gonna be able to build an RV garage. You might be able to build a boat garage or something like that, but you're done, you're out of space. You know, so like I said, it doesn't matter if people with half acre lots are bigger. They got plenty of room, but they've got like 4,200, square feet of usable space. But we're talking people with quarter acre or third acre lots. This is a big deal, and you could simply say that they're not included in the 30% and give them their own little category. Maybe they get another 10% or 15% or whatever. I don't know. I mean, the shade structure doesn't have to be massive. It's just, I think people should be able to put a shade structure in their backyard plus a garage.
So if it's a bigger lot, then it goes back to what you're saying, Thad, is the city doesn't want people to have different things pieced throughout their backyard. Structures.
I think that's the wording, is they're looking at an awning as a structure, where shade cells, I guess, are not a structure. Is that right?
They're permitted. We require permits on structures, yeah.
Sorry, and I'm not familiar with the shade structure code for Washington City, but is there a distinct description of what qualifies as a shade structure versus, adding onto your garage? Yeah, adding onto your garage.
A structure would be solid, in my eyes, and an awning is a little more solid. A shade cell is just a canopy.
So I guess in my mind, I'm visualizing, you've got these aluminum awnings that are going up everywhere. Some are pergola, some are solid top. But could someone build an RV garage and then extend the roof of the RV and add some columns? Would that still be considered a shade structure, or is that considered part of the structure? Okay.
A little confused why this is an issue. I mean, I remember talking to Drew about this, and I was asking, and he's like, if you put like if it's fire rated, whatever, you put an awning or shade structure up against it, it doesn't count against this. I mean, that's what he said. But then looking at this, it obviously does. I think there's a discrepancy in how the code is written and how we've historically enforced it.
Chairman, I'd just like the public to know that my favorite service assignment from the mayor is the Shade Tree Committee. Not the Shade Structure Committee, the Shade Tree Committee.
It's a thing?
Yeah. Once a quarter.
Oh, man. He would be the guy that makes a shade structure in his whole backyard there. I don't even know where to go. I know we need to have a public hearing, and I'm still kind of, I don't know, I'm confused. I'm up here. We went back and forth about this for a long time. And so I understand when we amended the city code, we were including shade structures in the 30%. Is that correct?
That's how it's written.
That's how it's written, but it's not what we said.
Not what we said, but that's how it's written.
Wow.
Well, if they're not building within their setbacks, why does it matter?
All right. Who wants to take over tonight right here? Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm sitting here thinking in a real world for myself. I'm like, it's probably closer to a half acre than a third acre. It's in between. The office is 196 square feet under permitted.
But seriously though, I mean, if we're not we can't build in an over. I mean, we're still on the setbacks. I mean, it still kind of goes back to the setbacks. If you have 20-foot setbacks on the rear, you can't build back there. Or 10.
10.
Huh? Right, and a detached. I mean, we're still kind of into that, right? I mean, you can put something back there, but if it's on your setback, you can't put a building on a setback, even if it's detached.
So I feel like the commission, and this one has a very similar genesis as your prior one. There's city law and state law. All of the legislative levels essentially allow folks to recommend law changes, right? And this one's a recommended law change. It comes from a lawyer. And it doesn't have to come from a lawyer, but that helps because they usually give you red lines and write it for you, right? But we as a legislative body accept suggestions for law changes. Now, this one is interesting because just a few months ago, this commission spent quite a lot of time debating another request. And back then, your decision was to increase the percentage. In other words, change the law so that you allow more fill within a backyard open area. But it was back then, it was the way that the law became written was that you still value some open space there. This one's challenge is it's requesting that shade structures or awnings not be counted toward any of that open space. And so it becomes more difficult to regulate this concept of we need to make sure that some of that backyard doesn't get filled with something, with structure. And so that doesn't mean you can't change your mind and write it again, right? The nice thing about law is it changes as fast as the legislative body wants to change it. But this one's challenge for staff is that staff worked with the commission and the council for all of the time it took to make that original change. And this one appears to still run afoul of what was baked into the code, which was a valuing of space not being filled with structures in the backyard.
So if the structures, back to what, Pete, I think you were saying, why do I see in the city structures that are right up against the fence? Is there not regulation for that? Or I mean, enforcement? This is in rear yards.
So we have buildings that are put up against the fence that aren't permitted, right? That just are non-compliant. We have a lot of, you construction guys will be surprised by this, but a lot of things get built without permits, right? Without compliance with code. I know, it's surprising. It's surprising to you guys that work there. But yeah, a lot of stuff happens that we don't even sanction. Now, our enforcement policy in this city has been with pretty gentle gloves. That might change someday as legislative and council preferences change, but we don't tear down a lot of buildings, right? We haven't had that proactive of an enforcement methodology to date. I won't share my personal experience because there's one right next to the lot line and land that I'm aware of that, anyway, it exists. It exists because not everything comes through and not everything complies.
So tonight, what's coming before us is something that wants to allow it, the possibility of being open to 100% of the lot line. Is that correct?
This is saying that shade structures could fill 100% of the backyard. I think that you may take this invitation and ask yourself, what else do we value as much as shade, right? Are there other uses back there that we would also want to have that same exclusion? If you're going to do it for this one, what else is also, justified of that same type of treatment? We know why this one is just for shade structures. It's coming from representatives from that industry, right? But yeah, this one's essentially saying remove shade structures from the question of 30% of the backyard. In other words, let us fill as much as a homeowner wants to.
Does it make sense, or is it, for lack of a better word, silly to say, to keep the 30% for a dwelling unit, a garage or something like that, but if there's shade structures, that there's another percentage it can go to, up to 50, allowing for some, but not wide open.
So I think your job is to decide what makes sense. I will just say, in my experience living in this city, the lot sizes in the backyards that I grew up in are very, very different than the lot sizes in the backyards that are being built today, right? Like, the reality is there is a very noticeable shift in yard usage from homes built in the 80s and homes built today. But I think that's part of your role of representing the community, is to decide what makes sense for today.
You guys have comments on this side?
I tend to agree with maybe trying to structure it so that you do allow maybe a little bit more for a shade, but I think this one in particular is probably declined the way that it's written because it eliminates any monitoring. But I feel like I would be open to restructuring the wording potentially and adding an extra percentage if it was a shade structure and not a real structure. I don't know what those percentages are, but I think it would have to be discussed and determined.
So here's my idea. I don't think I wouldn't want it open-ended. I don't think it should be open-ended, right? But let's take my example of a 3rd-acre lot, okay? 3rd-acre lot, you got a 4,000 square foot rear yard, all right? That's typical. Of that, 30% is 1,200 square feet. Someone built an RV garage, is 1,000 square feet. So you've got 200 square feet left over. A typical awning by your pool is going to be 300 to 400, probably 400 square feet. All right, so you're about 200 square feet shy. And we don't need to make it like way open-ended. Just maybe we say something like, an awning or shade structure can have an additional 10% or something like that, because it's not a building. It's not, there's no foundation or this or that. Give shade structures and awnings an extra 10%, and that way it's still limited, but they've got a little bit of flexibility there.
Why don't we just make it a conditional use, so they have to come in and ask for permission to do it if it's over that? And then we just answer it that way. Leave it the way it is, but let them. My backyard, I had to concrete the whole thing, so I put a pool in just for soil issues. So I have no grass, no shade back there. It's hot, but I should be able to come in and ask for, all right, look, this is what I had to do because of the soil issues. Let me cover this much so that I can actually go out and enjoy my backyard. I think it would better be used as someone coming in and asking for a representation, because if we're not really having this big of problems right now, then just ask for a use and let us look at it. So they're not going over. How much did they go over? Do they want to go over 10% or 50%? I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to have come all the time.
So do we just say the shade structures that exceed the 30% requirement or whatever, can come in and apply for a conditional use?
A variance on the
and that
code.
Way, like if they're coming in here and they're like, hey, I want to cover my whole backyard, we're like, no. If they're
So
like,
variance is a zoning word. We would just, call it a permitted exception or something like that, right?
Wouldn't that be the easiest way? That would be the easiest way to do it and leave everything the way it is. And then because if we're not going to go over it, that's kind of what I would look at doing instead of trying to change it and make it good for everybody. Because basically we're good for most people right now. This is, in my opinion, is the small few. And if this is what they want to do, then come in and show us rather than changing all of it. But that's rather than going through and rewriting everything and doing all of that.
I actually like that idea.
I keep going back to, did we make a mistake by not considering this when we went through all this? Because we spent a lot of time on it.
You asked this very question, and Bruce said, shade structures awning is not part of the square footage. And so that's kind of what we were thinking at the time. Like, we were just thinking of building structures, et cetera. Now again, for what we're talking about here, it's not going that much over. Like Pete said, it's It's not like every single person is having an issue, but you will run into some issues on this. If somebody builds an RV garage, you will run into an issue, but somebody has a quarter acre lot, yeah, they'll have an issue every time.
Staff supports the ordinance how it's currently written. I would hate to see this meeting become flooded with conditional use permits for shade structures. If you are considering increasing it, staff likes hardened definitions, makes our job easier, like the 10% addition that was noted. Shade structures could go up to an additional 10%. It'd leave this meeting freed up and allow staff to do their job more easily.
Is that 10% of the 1,200 or 10% in addition?
An additional,
to the 30?
an additional
So just make it
10%
40.
of their backyard in addition to the 30. But that 10% can only be used for shade structures and awnings, not for more garage or more ADU or whatever. I think that would work.
Yeah, and the thought is, does it need to be 10 or is 5 sufficient? I mean, I don't know, punch the numbers.
I would go 10. 10 is only 400 square feet. I mean, it's not, and that's like the size of a typical pool, shade.
Are we going to be okay with a shade structure that covers 50%?
There would be more of an issue with a quarter acre lot. Again, the smaller the lot, the bigger percentage they need, right?
I think it's hard. It would depend on the structure that's built, right? Most of the industry structures are really attractive looking, but you could build a really ugly shade structure that covers 50% of your backyard and have all the neighbors, really dislike it. And so it's hard to answer that question. I think it depends on what they're doing and how they're doing it, really. And
I would want it to be like a true shade awning or whatever, not like somebody built a Quonset hut, in their backyard and calls it an awning, right? I mean,
the shade structure, just to clarify that, there's been a few questions on it, is open on 3 or 4 sides. If it's attached to the house, it's open on the other 3 sides. If it's away from the dwelling, it's open on all 4 sides.
But it also could be made out of wood, right? It could have a whole bunch of wood out there, right? And so it's hard to judge them until you see them.
I'm trying to figure out my own lot here. I'm texting Melody like, hey.
Do we need to open a case on your yard, Commissioner?
I'm just, I'm trying, I guess that's the simplest way for me to understand it in real terms. Because in my mind, 30% covers it, but then I guess it wouldn't in some cases. And I understand and I get the idea about maybe on a case by case basis, but then how many of those we really want to hear?
Well, how many would we really get? I mean, we're assuming that everyone's going to run out and get an awning that's going to cover 30% or more of their backyard. But maybe they're not. Just put up a big umbrella.
What I'm going to do, no, I'm going to do it right now. What I'm going to do right now is open this to the public hearing portion of this section. And for those of you that want to speak to this particular item, please come forward and do so. And please state your name for the record. If there's anybody that would like to speak to this item. Not yet. Let's come a little bit after we close the public hearing so we can give you more time. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll open it up back to the commissioners for additional comments and questions, and the applicant can come forward at this time, please. And state your name for the record, and we can ask some questions. First, I'll let you start if there's any comments. You're hearing what we're saying. Is there anything you'd like to address with regards to that?
Thank you. I'm Robert Jensen. This application isn't really on behalf of my law firm, but on behalf of the awning company, but also a number of citizens. And I'll tell you, as all the comments you made, I just thought, oh, we can respond to that. So I hope I can keep track of them all and try to respond to them all. First of all, we have 6 customers right now, and several of them have been rejected because it exceeded the 30%. Imagine a small lot and you have backyard corridor of 20 feet by 50 feet or so, and it's just dead rock. There's nothing you can do with that backyard. It makes it very, very difficult. And no matter what you do, you're going to want some sort of shade with it, and it creates a real issue. I've put together a series of papers, and maybe I can just I wish that and I apologize, I don't have this so that we could put it up on the screen. But I think first page just speaks for itself. Just really quick, we live in a hole, and Washington County is violently hotter than anywhere else in the state. We're 10, 20 degrees hotter than most other areas of the state. In fact, if you look at this map, it puts St. George down in the phase number 3 high, but notice that's the dark orange, and almost all of that southern area, including Washington City, is actually in phase 4, which is very, very high. So I mean, that's the hottest place in the state. Our backyards are, a lot of them, just completely unusable a quarter of the year. You think about how often you get outside. So turning to page 2 brings up another issue that I thought was interesting. As I hear you all discussing, I made a heading at the top, and originally that was rear yard considerations. And last minute I changed it and I said, well, it's not really rear yard, it's shade structure considerations. And then last minute I added accessory building considerations. The reason I think that's important is because this code, the ordinance that you're talking about right now, was just amended, right? In May, and it was changed from 25 to 30%. That's an accessory building consideration. That's that issue. What we want is a little bit different. We want the commission to consider shade and what can we do with shade, and should shade structures actually be a part of accessory building, a garage, a storage facility, sheds. And I think it was mentioned earlier that actually had been discussed as the ordinance was amended to deal more with accessory buildings and garages and sheds and those kinds of things. What we would like the city to do is stop and look at the shade structure considerations. And if we go down the list there, we look at number 2, all municipalities have a modifying regulation ordinance and they have an accessory building ordinance. But look at number 3. Some municipalities have creatively gone the accessory building so it can occupy 30 to 50% of the rear yards. And like you said, Washington just went from 25 to 30. So they're looking at making more use of that backyard. But in the next one, allow accessory buildings percentage to apply to rear and side yards. So they're increasing that percentage by including also the side yards. But I like the third one, and I think that's what's important. Municipalities have simply defined accessory building to exclude shade structures and say that's in a different class, all of its own. 110, 115 degrees in the backyard. And when that's the case, our kids don't want to go outside. You turn the page, just a quick schematic. What I did is say that if your backyard is 1/3 a garage, then what that means is that if you have a patio, it's not going to be covered. If you have a pool, there's not going to be a shade structure next to it. If you have playgrounds, they're not going to be covered. And if you have an outdoor kitchen, it's not going to be covered. Outdoor kitchens are picking up hard and fast. And as I think back, I can't remember seeing an outdoor kitchen that wasn't covered. And so all we're doing is asking Washington if you would please consider the importance of shade. And I appreciate what was said. I want to say it was Eldon, I'm not sure, but the focus of the last amendment was open space. We want to make sure that we have open space. I think that's beautiful, and I think it's important. And I think we also need to add to that, wouldn't it be great if we could make that open space all the more usable? When you walk into somebody's backyard and you see just a long corridor of gravel, there's no benefit in that at all. When you walk into somebody's backyard and there's a really nice shade structure, you don't look at that and say, it's closed in, it's crowded. You look at that as being usable, whether it's a pool, a patio, a playground, whatever it is. So I think we're just trying to get the city to separate shade from accessory buildings. The comment was made, and I think in the recommendation to the commission, was that this ordinance or this proposal be changed, and honestly, or that it be denied. And I don't disagree, given some of the comments that have been made. And let me make a suggestion. It was never our intent in doing this to say we want to be able to put a shade structure across 100% of the backyard. And if you limit that, there's no opposition to that. I think you could also say the city might be opposed to put a swimming pool 100% over someone's backyard. Maybe not a good idea. But limited, that's fine. But maybe what we would recommend is, number one, that we say, if we separate accessory buildings from shade structures, and we say you've got 30% already, if we pull shade structures out, and the suggestion earlier was, well, we could pull it out of the definition in number 5. We could pull it out of the definition of accessory building. And there was already some discussion of whether the word including or including really was meant to be excluding. But we could pull that out and then have a separate limitation. And we would the 10% is not a bad suggestion. If you've got 30% garage, then you can have 10% more. And maybe we say that an awning can cover 30%. If you have a garage or a accessory building, then you could bump it up another 10%. I think that works. Commissioner Anderson's math was that if you have a quarter acre lot, you have a home, it also matters where that home is positioned. And I've got a picture of one of these that was earlier denied. And again, I wish it was a better picture. This is the backyard. That's the proposed awning. That failed and would fail the 30% ordinance as well. And yet, if you look at that backyard, that's all it is a gravel corridor. It's useless. You can't do anything. No one's going to sit in the backyard. And with the narrow awning that's available, you couldn't invite over 2 couples and sit in the backyard. So maybe the proposal should simply read that as the first line, accessory buildings and structures, excluding shade structures as outlined below, located in the rear yard. So it's limiting it just to accessory buildings, and it's defining that shade structure is a different animal. We might also suggest that we create in that same paragraph a definition of a shade structure to be as I don't know if you were reading that right out of the ordinance, Mr. Sigmiller, but the idea is that it has no walls. If it's an attached shade structure, then of course, it has one. I guess it could even have two, but it wouldn't add any walls to the structure. And I think the ordinance on down also requires in C4 requires that it meet fire code requirements. But notice that the fire code requirement is when under C is when the accessory building is detached. And when it's detached, in some certain situations, it can go clear back into the rear setback, just like a garage can. The garage can go clear back, you just can't drain onto somebody else's property. So the critical part is number 5. Appreciate the suggestions that have been given, and we would love to be able to amend that to say that if there is a garage or some other structure in the backyard, that a shade structure should be able to add maybe 10% to that percentage.
Robert, let me hold you just for a second there.
Please.
You can stay there or you can sit down, whichever you prefer. So commissioners, let me ask you this question. If I'm understanding some of the things that he's saying, and I'm thinking back what we were talking about, if somebody didn't have a RV garage, which initially that's really what we were talking about when we revisited this, but they wanted to put a shade structure that was 30% of their yard. I never even considered something like that at the time when we were going through all this. That sounds like that's acceptable to somebody. Somebody could do that now if they wanted to. Are we all on the same page about that? Is that how it would read now? If somebody like that yard that he had that was a small yard and they wanted to build an awning that took up their yard, they could do that up to 30%. Am I understanding that right? Is based on how we
up to 30%. Yeah.
Up to 30.
If it's a super small lot like this one, I mean, this is a really small lot. It's probably an 1/8 acre lot or whatever, so they're not gonna have much backyard. So 30% of that's not much.
Yeah. It seems to me that I would tend to agree with some of the things that have been said about maybe a shade structure should be looked at differently than, as long as it's not attached. If it's attached, that's a different ballgame. It is part of that accessory unit. If it's separate and it's not attached, maybe it should be looked at separately, that there's an allowable percentage or something like that. Because I don't want to disallow it, but I think we're in agreement, we can't leave it wide open either. That's what we're trying to avoid. We kind of joked about, there's a home in town that before any of this was enacted, you could build a shed and there's a house that has a lot, and the shed is over 50% of the lot. I mean, it's massive. It's probably 60-70% of the lot. So the house is tiny, they have a giant shed with a bunch of stuff in it. It's a commercial looking shed. It just looks terrible. And so we're trying to avoid things like that. And that's the whole reason. We didn't want to see RV garages show up in backyards that took up 70% of the lot. With the house and the RV garage, there's nothing there. That was the initial why we were trying to limit this. Now we're talking about, oh wait, what about shade structures? Because that's another element to this as well. And then you could say, well, we don't want to put a pool that's the whole backyard either, because that's another structure, right? So there's all these little increment or elements that fit into this that maybe can't all be thought about in one meeting, certainly not by some people that are appointed by, I wouldn't think of this stuff. So I'm in agreement, and I wanted just to take a second and talk to the commissioners about, are we in agreement that a shade structure should be looked at separate, and maybe it should be looked at that there's an additional percentage on top of the 30, or how do we want to look at that if we're going to look at that differently than the 30%, if we were? I think what I'm trying to do is back into all this, like whoever writes it and what it sounds like, I don't really care so much about that other than what we're trying to accomplish. And then somebody can put words on paper that make it make sense.
So while you're all thinking, so the picture that Mr. Jensen showed a situation in a very small lot with a house that mostly was built right up to setbacks, right? And so as staff looks at that and interprets that, we say our code has built into it that they wanted sight lines and viewscapes and different things that aren't entirely blocked by structures, and therefore it doesn't meet code because of the calculation. We field complaints from neighbors on a daily basis at this city, and sometimes they build a shade structure that blocked my view. Sometimes it's their shade structure is changing the way the wind blows or whatever. We get complaints about everything, right? And it's not just shade structure, it's everything. And so what the code has had is it's had more of an element to value certain things there. And so there was a calculation built into it so that staff could apply that value. I'm not saying the values haven't changed. Your job is to help us know what value you want us to administer. And that's part of what I think you're inviting the commissioners to decide. The other challenge is you don't have to have your backyard be useless if you want to. You don't have to build it to be just block or just wall, just, a sea of gravel, right? But there's no question that in an area as popular as ours, even though it's really hot, right? People like to have a shady spot to sit down. Go to a parking lot that's got shade trees. You'll see where all the cars show up, right? Shade is certainly a value that, at least for about 6 months of the year, people are willing to scrum for around here. And so I think what the presenter's asking is give shade structures, an exclusion from the calculation because shade is that valuable in this area. That's what I hear.
I don't mind. I think I don't mind exclusion, but I don't want it open-ended. It can't be. I refuse to even consider that. And that's why I was suggesting earlier, as it is presented to us tonight and it's written, I would tend to disagree with it and deny it and let city council talk about it. I also think this question is much bigger than this meeting, where I feel like we can't get to a consensus tonight. It's a bigger issue that I don't know if we can or can't get to it. I don't want to exclude shade because it is a commodity. I mean, it is nice to have, and obviously people want it. I can see totally why the city would have denied that picture's shade structure. I would think, oh, it would look terrible if I was a neighbor looking at that. And then it goes to what you said. So I understand why it was rejected. But then so I don't know. I'm just going in circles, and you guys are going to have to help carry me out of this hole that I'm digging for myself, because I don't know what to do at this point with this.
Can I?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm at.
I have a question for Mr. Jensen.
Hansen, can I just ask what you mean?
I think it's too close to the back fence is what I would see from there.
So please I think it's important to understand that the ordinance allows a garage 15 feet tall, roofed structure against the back fence.
It's my understanding.
Within 3 feet of the back wall.
Yeah, at least
right?
3 feet, at best case scenario,
Right.
10 feet if it, yeah.
Right? And so awning is treated
Let me, real quick, it can be 3 feet from the back wall. It's got to be 10 feet from the house. So yes, what you're saying is true, but in that scenario, I don't think it would change anything, but I understand there are.
I have a question for you. Is that shade structure, is it attached or detached?
This one's attached.
It's attached?
Yes.
So my guess would be the reason it got denied is because it's over the setback lines. So that what we're talking.
It's not.
The reason I say is what we're talking about here is detached structures.
Well, the proposal is for attached and detached.
Okay, that was
right?
my question.
And this awning, by the way, the awning's not black, it's just highlighted to show that it's black. This awning is not entering the setbacks.
So I see it as entering the setbacks, unless I'm wrong. The way I see it, it's attached to the house, which would mean it needs to be at least 10 feet from the back wall.
Right.
And is it?
And it is.
And it is. It just doesn't look like it from here.
No. It meets. It meets the setbacks.
Okay.
And was denied. And the awning that would have been allowed literally would not have allowed you to set 6 chairs around and sit down with friends in your backyard. So,
the picture is just a little deceiving to me. It looks like it's right on the back fence.
You know what would be brilliant is to have actual aerial photographs of placement of things to show. I think that Mr. Anderson brought up a couple of times that what's left is an awning. Your house, as you explained, is not going to be allowed in 100 different directions. Whereas if we said awnings can occupy 30% of the backyard, and also accessory buildings could occupy 30% of the backyard, then it doesn't look like it's all packed in with structure, because one structure is sometimes slatted and open to the sky, and it's bringing shade, and it's making it so you can use your outdoor kitchen and your pool and your playground and different things.
That one was denied. It was denied because of why? It took up more than 30% of the backyard? Is that why?
Yes.
But if it's within the setbacks, why does that matter? And why do we have setbacks? That's my question.
Because
if
your
it's built
ordinance-
within, I understand I think I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to say it real quick, and then you can go,
Sorry.
please. If I have a 10-foot setback on my house, that means I get to build from 10 to 10 as much as I want on that lot. Correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Why not? Why do we have setbacks then?
Your original house you can build within that building envelope. Anything accessory to that original house,
But if it's attached to the house,
right? It's
it's in
viewed as
addition to the house, and it's part of that envelope of that house. I mean,
Right.
correct? If it's attached to the house and it's within the setbacks, it shouldn't matter.
Oh, you're saying you could build a house you just have a 10-foot setback around your entire property and then everything else would be a structure or something?
Well, yeah. I don't understand. That's what I'm saying. I mean, if you have, then what you have your setbacks. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand that part.
So I guess you'd have to calculate what percentage the setbacks cover.
Well, that's what we do with our setbacks on our lots. I thought that's what they were for.
See, that's why I need help digging out of this hole.
Because I'm confused now if that's not the case.
confusing myself with all of this and recent memory with what we talked about. And then this, where I'm just going circles in my mind trying to make sense of it all. And honestly, I can't. So it doesn't have anything to do with you and your presentation, Robert. It's something we've been working on for a long time. And this is something that we didn't consider and I didn't think about, but it is an issue. It's an issue for that person. It's an issue for me. It's an issue for other people. One of the things I didn't want to do is I don't want to be sitting up here as a commission having, whether it's one a month or two a month or one every 4 months or whatever, someone coming in about a shade structure they want to build. I don't want to do that. I think that we have bigger issues.
I want to comment on Pete's comment because I think he has a valid point here. Like if you come in and apply for a building permit, you can build right up to your setback. So you can fill more than 30% of your, so there's this definition, I guess, of what a backyard becomes. But if you build the structure and you fill the backyard up to the setbacks,
I know.
then your 30% becomes your setback. So that's kind of interesting, actually.
So there was something you wanted to add. Could you add your name for the?
I'm reading here in the code on this. So they're very different issues if it's detached or attached. If it's detached, you just have the building and you got 30% right now, right? If it's attached, then normally with anything attached, you have to stay within your setback, which on a quarter-acre lot or more, it's 20 feet in the back. If it's some of these smaller lots, it might be less. But this allows for a shade structure to be attached to within 3 feet of the property line. So going over the setback to within 3 feet of the property line, as long as it doesn't exceed 30%. So very different issues, what we're talking here, detached versus attached. Because you can't take a garage to within 3 feet of your property line if it's attached. You have to stay within your setback. So the 3 foot setback rule and the 30% rule, they only are applying to a shade structure. But this other thing we've been talking about all night of 30% for detached structures and stuff, that applies only to detached structures. So they're two very different issues. And if it's an attached structure, if you got a super small yard, you might not meet the 30%, but it's going to be less of an issue with an attached than it is a detached.
Say that again.
I understand it. And
Could you say your name for the records?
I'm Adam Stewart. I own Stewart Awning, and he said the awning company, which is my brother's competing company. So I'm going to clarify that it's Stewart Awning.
Oh, he did, or your attorney?
My representative did, because he represents him also. So
we'll get you.
We've known Robert a very long time, and he's a good person to both me and my brother. So I have him because I'm a passionate person, and it can sometimes come off as aggression. I'm not aggressive. We've worked really well with the city of Washington. The code that changed actually to the setback accepting attached structures getting closer was also Robert and I 7 years ago. On Carriage Lane, there was a home with a 32-foot backyard, and the attached definition only allowed or required a 30-foot setback. I had built that awning without a permit that many years ago. It got in trouble. We chose to help the city see why we felt this structure should be allowed. And Robert's genius was that he showed that if he took 5 feet off from the house portion of the cover, it was now legal because it was allowed to be within a certain 2 feet of the yard. So what we showed is that simply by attaching it, that homeowner could have only had a 2-foot awning, and it would have made no sense. We're here again to do the same thing now. I don't believe that the setbacks should be allowed to be filled with anything. I agree. I think what we would most say is that inside of that setback, attached or detached, there should be percentages that are open sky. I agree. But the reason I've chosen to spend money to try to help the city modify their policy a little bit is actually because I'm a bleeding heart for these people that are on fixed incomes in smaller and smaller homes and lots. And when they call my reps out there, having moved here because it was an affordable place and they loved the sun and it was good for them and their spirit and they're breathing their air, they're leaving the smog, but then they can't even invite 2 of their children with their grandchildren over to sit around one 6-person chair and walk around it in the shade because the lot coverage can keep them. And so you're exactly right, Mr. Anderson, I don't know you, that it's not the affluent client that's having this issue. The half acre or larger, they're getting multiple structures. My business speaks to the highest niche client predominantly. I'm building $50,000, $80,000 lattice, beautiful structures out of non-combustible materials. By the way, that's one definition you could use to help guide this, is distinguish that when you cover maybe exceptional amounts that it's in a non-combustible material, so you're reducing fire hazards, and really my product is zero maintenance. You never paint it, so it doesn't look dilapidated even in 40 years. And so I'm saying that the attached structure, we got a little bit closer to the wall because we're a non-fire threat and we're not detached. But we're also saying that whether it be attached or detached, there should be on these 1/4 and 1/3 acre lots, some 40% ranges for them, because even that might only be a 10 by 15 awning. And it's really, when the sun gets low, it really, frankly, is even hard to capitalize on that space. It's hard to get to the shade, and people don't want to be cooped up in their house. Depression is a real thing for some of these elderly folk, and they can't get to the fresh air and the reverb light, the reflective light, because it's all direct. They're cooking. The second issue that I think is really relevant is we are living in a place with less water and higher consumption of power. Awnings do something that nothing else does. It's open on all sides, but it takes a concrete wall, which is what a house is, that gets direct sun for 5 hours and will reach 180 degrees. I don't care if you have blown in or expansions, foam, insulation, you're losing that battle all day long, which means power bills are going through the roof. And if people want shade, what isn't regulated is big trees. So your water consumption will go up directly proportionate to the amount of awning limitation you put in place, because they will find shade one way or another, and it will often be by something cheap, like a small tree that in 10 years consumes so much water littering their perimeter of their yard that you will beg to have an aluminum awning that has done nothing but collect water and put it in the system for you. So I think that there's a lot of really good reasons why the city actually should be motivated to let homeowners have a little bit more. We do not want 80% of the backyard to be filled with shade. We want 40%, something that on the small lots is the difference between actually getting to be outside and staying inside all the time. And I will defer back to Robert.
We'll just make it clear, we don't allow awnings to collect water and return it to our culinary system. It goes to the stormwater, it goes to the river, it goes to the reservoir downstream.
Bad references, sorry. No, but replacing a tree, right? I think that was the point, is that an awning replaces a tree that sucks water.
I'm gonna need you guys to help me tonight. I don't even begin to know how I'm gonna vote on something like this, because I don't know if it's clear to me.
So I think that your job is to, that they're going to write it again. They're the ones that adopt the laws of the city. I think your job really is hold the hearing and then send them your best thoughts. The vote, it goes to the council regardless of how the vote turns out.
I'm still a little bit confused, because if we have our setbacks and they don't have any accessory dwelling units back there on these smaller lots, we're not going to. but their setbacks, they go in for zoning and want a smaller setback on their lots, an 8-foot setback. Well, they should be able to build up to that 8-foot setback, correct?
Yeah, in theory, you're right. Correct. If it's
The house can build all the way up to that 8-foot setback. So if that awning is attached to the house, it's part of the house now, and it can go to the 8-foot setback, correct?
A shade structure is not part of the house. That's the difference in the code. It can, if it's attached, it can go to within 3 feet, but not like not a frame porch, like a shade structure, like an awning. That's how the code reads. If it's attached. If it's detached, then they got to stay within the setbacks no matter what, and you got 30%, period. That's why I said they're two different issues.
There's also probably the biggest factor that's impossible to predict, and the picture that was shown to you shows you this. A backyard, a lot where the structure was located almost all the way to the back setback, right? So it really minimizes that backyard. And so then staff has to say, what is the backyard, and how does the percentage calculate? They do that because the code says they're supposed to. And so there are situations where that's a punitive calculation, right? Like there's not much you get to do back there. Now, I don't, as a guy that likes to plant and grow things, I don't agree that it's useless. And I've made several complaints against my neighbor's shade trees because they shaded my garden, right? And so I think that the question is the value that you've baked into your code a value that you want to keep, or do you want to give an exception to that, or get rid of it entirely? Last time the question was mostly about accessory buildings back there, and should the whole backyard be able to have those? I think you're revisiting this historic language that baked in some values about backyards, and trying to decide whether you think the city council should adopt a law that changes.
I think that we should have backyards. I think that's why we should have setbacks for backyards. And then if you're going to want to build in those setbacks, then you shouldn't be building in those setbacks. And if you're not in that setback, then as long as it's not close to the house, you got your distance from your house to your other dwelling unit, and it's not in your setback, then and that's my opinion. I mean, that's why they should have setbacks on these homes. It keeps them in the thing. That's my opinion. So, I mean, if you're going to have a 20-foot setback, that to me is a 20-foot backyard. If somebody wants to fill it up, they want to fill it up. It's not smart, but that's their option.
Robert, I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes if you have anything that you wanted to final or add as final commentary.
I would ask that the commission take their priorities and the things you think that are good, maybe that have been suggested, and then also propose, so that this is conditioned and goes with some direction to the city council. For instance, and I don't mean to put words in the council's mouth, but if you believe that shade structures should be encouraged, that shade is something that we want to be able to see more of, and let it be treated a little bit more liberally, that shade structures then be defined to be separate, excluded from I liked the suggestion that the commission has hinted at here and there, that perhaps shade structures that should have their own limitation. If an accessory building is 30%, those kinds of things, I think would be helpful. We would even be happy to take another shot at a revision to put some of those concerns in it, and present that either to you or to the city council to help address some of those things. I just have to say I appreciate the discussion.
Would you rather we table this or deny it, or do you want approval or denial? I mean, would you rather table it and reword it, or just get an answer and move on?
I would rather have an approval conditioned on the things that you think are important, and have that go to the city council, and with that we could propose some different language and include your conditioned approval and take that to the city council.
I'll just remind you, last year, the commission and council considered and then approved the water conservation ordinance, but you'll recall that it does require shade trees. Like, it doesn't allow properties that are going to be asking for a building permit to come in with nothing of a green planting, right? And so I think the presentation's understood. Your recommendation to the council can have conditions, although it's you don't get to condition the council. Really, you're just trying to tell them the values that you think your recommendation holds.
And to reiterate, on this particular item, staff is recommending denial. Is that correct? Okay. So that wants me to ask this question with you. If we all defaulted to what the staff is recommending that we do, and you have the opportunity to go to city council with a denial, as opposed to tabling it and reworking it or working with the city or something, in a version of that before you get a denial, do you prefer one of those two? If being approved is not in the table? Because the truth is, certainly in most cases, I've noticed in my tenure that it's very uncommon that we're not on the same page as staff with regard to their recommendation to us on everything. For me, certainly I'll default to what the staff is recommending, which to me is denial. And as many times in my head as I've run around this thing, based on other things outside of this meeting as well, all of our previous meetings about this stuff, I'm totally lost. And so my go-to is like, I'm going to go with what they said, and then let city council, and you have every right to go to city council and hammer it out with them, and that's fine because they get to make the decision. But if approval is not on the table, do you prefer one of the other two?
Yeah, I think I'd rather table it. What? Yeah, I think we'd rather table it, and what would be helpful in that is if the commission would say, I like this, I like this, I like this, we'll take really good notes. We'll come back with a proposal that addresses your concerns.
Yeah, and say that, because I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know if we know what we want.
Okay.
So I know you guys know what you want, which is totally fine. From us, we're trying to think outside of the realm of what our expertise is and let the city handle that. They know what they want, you know what you want. Come together and come back to us and like, okay, this is what's best.
So even appreciate it. So even maybe then express your concerns, what they are. And frankly, we've heard them.
Yeah.
And it's been super helpful. And I mean, there was 1,000 ideas that were a big deal. And I don't mean to speak for the city staff, right? But I don't see the city staff denying this for the reasons we meant to bring it up.
So let's get the city staff to an approval, and then let's see it again, however that happens.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because typically when it comes to denial,
in fact, as we presented this, we were told that we would have what's it called? A work meeting. That's not what it's called, but it's something like that with city staff. And the next thing we know, and I'm not sure why.
Who told you that?
Who told me that there would be those 3 phases?
There'd be a work meeting.
I think it's just in the ordinance. Right? And
so you read that in the ordinance.
And
well, you're sounding like somebody gave you a promise that wasn't kept.
No.
And I want to clarify, because we try to keep our promises. I didn't mean to say that.
It was just our impression. And I was looking at the ordinance, and I don't mean to say that the ordinance really relates to a proposal to amend an ordinance, but generally, that was on your city.
So the planning commission doesn't hold work meetings. They always just hold planning commission meetings. The city council distinguishes their meetings between work meetings and regular meetings.
I
Work
think it was with the
meetings.
staff.
Work meetings. Okay, so there's.
Like a developer meeting, I think
Yeah.
is what he's
So
talking
you read that in the ordinance is what you were trying to say? Because if somebody told you you'd get one, let's get you one.
Can
I mean, I sent a pretty lengthy
Can I
letter
ask a question of
and said, can
Mr.
we
Stewart?
Yeah, you've
talk?
sent your lengthy letter to department heads and council members. You did. We agree. Yeah, we're not disputing that. You told me somebody told you you'd get a work meeting. I'm trying to verify who did so we can keep our
I didn't mean to
promises.
say that, if that's what I
Okay.
said.
I have a question for you. With some of these smaller awning on these smaller houses, what's the typical size of an awning on them? Like say if it's a 6,000 square foot lot or something.
Yeah, I'd say a 10 by or 12 by 20 is a very common awning for even like a retired couple.
Okay, so like 240. So
is that 20 feet of width and then 10 or 12 of depth? So the width is the bigger number because it's following the structure.
So on one of these lots like this, okay, so I'm just using Desert Ridge that we just did today as an example. Those are small lots. So I just looked up the setbacks on here. So Desert Ridge, the setback is 10 feet on the rear, and the width of the lots are 66 feet. Okay, so you got, you can go within 3 feet of the property line, okay, if it's attached. So that gives you 7 by 66 is 462 square feet is the backyard. Okay, so if you're 240 square feet is a typical, well, you wouldn't be able to do 240 because it can only be 7 feet deep. So 7 feet by how wide would you typically say?
Well, again, they really are all very custom, but
just in
it's
general.
not uncommon to have a 20 to 24 foot wide
20.
awning by 10 to 12 is a very average.
So let's say 20 by 7 is 140 square feet divided by 462 is 30%. So that right there would be at 30%.
Yeah.
So that would be the limitation then on a lot that's 66 wide by well, basically a 6,000 square foot lot, which is what we saw tonight at Desert Ridge.
Yeah.
So
like
it would be if they need to be bigger than that.
Yeah, so if I had a client say, hey, we get this every week, I want a 6 by 10 awning because they have a 6 by 10 slab. We're talking about covering that slab by at least a foot greater, like a roof would line a wall, because you can't capture the space without being bigger than it. And we also say that if you don't get out at least 8 to 10 feet projection from the structure, you probably will not get a realized benefit because the sun is getting too far underneath it. You're going to be up against your wall. So if you say that 10 foot is really the sweet spot, and trust me, we get to 16, 18, 20 all the time, but then you're talking about a table with 2 chairs and an end cap and the ability to walk around it. And that puts you in that 18 to 20 foot easily. If you're an LDS family, you're lucky if you only get 6 people in your backyard. And so you can find that you have a retired couple, fixed income, landed here, saving their lungs. There's a lot of them, they can breathe here, and they're looking to get sun, and they don't know where to go. And their backyards are ready to be used, but they need something to get under. And we're finding that it's more common to have this issue come up, and it came up in a batch. It was 3 in 10 days that we'd had 3 permits all filled. So it's almost like I don't think it was purposeful. I think the issue had come up and triggered an awareness that had not been had prior, and all of a sudden we'd had 3 failed permits, and those jobs are all still in limbo. 3 good jobs are just sitting there in limbo with homeowners, and one of them, Mr. Orrock, wanted to be here tonight, but I'd let him know late, to be honest. He has skin cancer on his nose that he is now free of, but he's literally trying to enjoy fresh air and be outdoors without the sun on him, and he's struggling to get that result in his own backyard.
So you're not going to be able to, on a lot that small, if it's 8,000 square feet or less, and they build the house all the way up to the setback, which they may or may not, but let's say they do. In that instance, you're not going to be able to get any more than 7 feet, right? But let's say they do at 40% rear coverage, plus you're not over the setbacks. That lets you build a 26 by 7 awning. Likewise, if you have the scenario of a 3rd-acre lot and they've got an RV garage, you can still build, a 24 by 10 or 24 by 12, awning, and you can have both. You can have your RV garage and an awning. It works with both. I think our original idea of just saying we got 30% for detached structures, that's fine how it is. For attached shade structures, and if we have shade structures on, detached stuff, we just say that shade structures can have an extra 10%. And it gives just enough leeway that you can put, some of these things in. I mean, you don't have to have a massive amount. We don't have to redo the whole code. You give an extra 10%, and that's going to allow most of these projects to go through.
It is, and again, this isn't our bread and butter. This is literally like 15% of our business. So this isn't self-serving. I'm literally making this investment because I speak to a client that always gets what they want. It's the ones that don't get what they want that really need it, that are the ones that are hard to leave hanging there. They don't know what to do next. And so we're really, if there was a win that I think is really win-win, and it's the only way to win, is those smaller lots getting a greater percentage. And that allows your language to be very clean, because we're not opening up Pandora's box to the 1 acres or the bigger lots. We're really saying, let's try to cater to the most needy and relevant clients that can't get there. And there's going to be outliers to that too, right? And so we can't solve it for everybody, but there's a growing group of people, your citizens, that are in need of something that I don't see the hardship to the other citizens of, or the city in any way. I can't find the hardship that we're protecting against, no matter how hard I try. And that's maybe the starting point. Define the hardship of somebody getting to have a 40% cover in their backyard attached to their house. Tell me the homeowner that calls and complains about that awning if it's following the setback right. And I said I didn't build with a permit at the time. I am the business now, and I am the only one, in my opinion, that is following your guys' permit laws perfect. If you ask your building department, I am really working hard to be totally compliant since 7 years ago. I learned a very valuable lesson. So you have some offenders out there doing that side lot line bull crap, and it's bull crap. It makes us look bad. That is not who we are, and that's why we're making the investment to try to make the guidelines for us workable when there's so many that are being dismissive of it. So
here's an idea. Okay, I think we could either say, just limit it to the people that are actually getting hardship with this, which are small lots, and you could say, all right, if you're an 8,000 square foot lot or less, you can have up to 50% as long as you're within your setback still, right? I mean, that's one thing that works, and you don't change any of the rest. You don't worry about the detached or this, that. You just, if there are these little teeny lots and they've got small, then you do that. Or we could say they get an extra 10% for shade structures beyond what it goes. I mean, I think either one. I think just looking at 8,000 square foot lots or less really helps people that they're talking about. We don't necessarily have to open up Pandora's box for everything. But he is right on some of these. Like if you've got a small house like this and they need a little bit of shade on their house, the math is against them.
What's an 8,000 square foot lot?
Yeah, what third?
An 8,000 square foot lot is between an eighth and a fourth. It's like a sixth.
That's under a quarter. So
yeah, it's a 6 acre lot, and so like the ones we looked at tonight with Desert Ridge, those are 5,000 and 6,000 acre lots.
I would argue,
or 5,000, 6,000 square foot lots.
I would argue that the quarter and under, the 10, right? Because it's 42,000 on an acre. Is that what it is? Somewhere in that. Yeah. So if it were the 10,000 and under or something like that, that would.
1/8 of an acre.
Yeah, so you're going to have you're going to still have a fairly big contingent in that quarter and under. So if you go to 8, you're leaving off a fairly sizable chunk of who I think.
Well, the reason I said 8,000 or under is because those are the ones that have a 10-foot setback where your house can be that close to the wall. If you got a quarter acre lot, you've already got a 20-foot setback, but you can go within 3 feet of that with your so you got plenty of room with that on a quarter acre.
It's still a percentage challenge, though.
Yeah, but if you're attached,
percentage of the backyard, that's
not going to be as hard on a quarter acre.
So staff looks at your site plan and looks at your rear corners and tries to draw a line and then define your backyard, right? Yeah. So if you've got 20-foot setbacks, you've got a much bigger backyard than if you've got a 10-foot setback. And so
the quarter acre lots have a bigger issue with the detached structures, but attached, it's only the 8,000 square foot or less that are an issue. Because they can't put a garage.
And it's not that I want that. At least for me, it's not that I'm trying to say no. I'm just trying to get to yes, and I don't know how that's defined.
I think we need to reword it.
I would have loved it more so if this would have come to us and the staff said yes, and you guys said yes, and we said yes, and it was done.
And I love how staff talks about that. They say we want them out on the. The only part of that I want to add to is there's many that aren't able to get to the trail or to their bike. They're homebound, and that's where the sanctuary really matters most. So if we really are saying we are outward focused, we care about people's lifestyles in Southern Utah, we've got to be inclusive. And that is people that are not getting to our trails and our bike systems. They're in their backyards looking to sit with their dog and their misting system and their, their cup of coffee and live it out.
Are
frankly.
we still having them get to a yes with staff, or where are we
Personally,
going
I would
right
like
now?
to table it and have them
Yeah.
get to a yes because there's a reason there's a no.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say, Eldon, what's your reason right now? But he probably could tell me. And I know Drew has input in that as well. So there's a reason it's no. Let's have we are not to work out here out on the podium here. And so that's why I'm wondering if tabling makes more sense and that's what you guys want. Otherwise, you can go to city council and argue with them about this.
Do you want to make a motion?
I think it's a simple solution. I think we've gotten way into the weeds here. I don't think it's as hard as we think. I mean, it's, we can say 8,000 square feet or less can use 50% of their backyard on.
0.2 of an acre.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Yeah, it's not as hard as we're talking. We've got weeds here, but it's
Weeds or shadows?
So then it would be an easy fix before it came back.
I think we can. Otherwise, we'll be here talking another 2 hours.
I don't know. Again, I'm in a hole you guys are gonna have to dig me out of.
The challenge with a table is it doesn't advance to the council. The applicant's entitled, if they've come here, they've gone through the process, if they wanted to go to the council either way, the table might impede them, right? And so that's the challenge with the table is it doesn't go to council, it sits around until something else has been accomplished.
Do they have an option to modify the wording before it gets to city council, or does it remain the same?
Yeah, they can modify it, absolutely. In fact, we'd like to see that if there's good recommendations from here, for them to incorporate those so they can say, look, we saw your commission, we incorporated them, here's what we've got, right? Like, I think that's how the process is meant to work.
If you can pull me out of the hole, and I'm happy to.
So my only concern with tabling is there's legal cases about indefinite or undefined tables being contrary to an applicant's rights. This applicant, it isn't a land use application, so they don't really have rights that we're holding up here. And it's just really a proposed legislative change. And so you probably could get away with tabling them forever. I think that giving them a chance to go talk with the council is what our purpose is. And so I'm just trying to speak to that.
Yeah. What about this? How about this? Okay. What if we say that attached shade structures for 8,000 square foot lots or less can take up to 50% of usable space, and they still have to follow setback requirements and all that stuff. That's still there. Like, it doesn't affect setbacks at all, but they can use up to 50% once they're a quarter acre lot. And again, you can specify this by the zone R110 or whatever, but once it's a quarter acre lot, say they can do 40%, and then the 30% that it is, and then same with detached, we just say, same thing, shade structures have up to 50% for 8,000 square foot or less, percent for R110, less, and 30% for, third acre or more detached structures that are on garage or whatever, then they've only got 10% left.
Lot size.
And that way it works. It's not open-ended. You don't have people with an acre lot building a, 30,000 square foot.
So why didn't we think of this when we were beating the dead horse for months on this previous?
I don't know.
That's why I'm wondering how we missed something that seems to be big.
I think that works.
Your focus was on accessory structures.
We were only talking about accessory
that conversation
structures.
was accessory structures. You didn't spend a lot of time on shade. So the benefit of this is it's really focusing you on shade, right? And your last one was focused on accessory structures.
So the part here that talks about attached, that is only shade. That doesn't deal with any other structure, just shade structures. The part with detached, they're kind of combined, right? As far as the code's written, the attached is only shade.
Shade needs its own
in the code, it has its own for attached.
Shade structures is defined. It's got to have 3 open sides, right? Which means it can have 4. You can go build a pergola with 4 corner posts and have a shade structure. But if your shade structure is got 4 corner posts and 2 close sides, it's not a shade structure, right? It's got to have open sides. The definition requires 3 open sides.
Okay, so commissioners, are you understanding or have additional questions for Corey? If I feel like I could see a motion come out of here that can get them to city council with some stipulations.
I think we send that to city council, say, these are our recommendations, that there's a tiered approach, and not the language that we're talking here. We give a tiered approach to city council, and they've got some recommendations, and they can figure out the wording. And these guys can figure out some amended wording between now and city council based on this tiered approach that we recommend.
Is that something that you guys agree with or understand here, or do you have questions or comments about it?
This Commissioner Middle, I feel like Corey's recommendation I would agree with. I feel like that seems reasonable. In the tiered.
Again, I don't think any of us are trying to say no, right? So does that help us get to a yes, I guess is the question. Pete, what do you think? You in the hole with me?
Yeah, I don't know where I'm at. Yeah, I'm confused still as far as the. Right, but why? Well, you should be able to build all the way up to your setbacks. If your house is within the setbacks and you have a lot that's too small for an accessory dwelling unit or a shade structure out there in your 10-foot, say you have an 8-foot backyard and your house is built all the way up to the 8 feet and you have 8 feet back there, yeah, you're not going to get shade back there. You shouldn't have bought that house.
But no, the code already allows them to go to 3 feet. It already allows them to go over the setbacks already.
Well, if it allows it, then
it's just limited to 30%, which means that it's got to be 7 feet by this little teeny square. That's all.
Then it's staying in. Then that's fine. I'm just saying I don't think we need to.
I'm just saying it's not a setback issue. We're not trying to change the setbacks at all. And if, like you said, if they're allowed to build up to the setbacks, then that's technically how they wrote it right here, where the sky's the limit as long as they don't go within the setbacks. But I mean, we're not changing setbacks at all. It's not even the issue.
But they can't do that, right?
Well, if it's attached
to your house, and you say you want to hook it to your house, go out there on the side. Your house has a jog in it, and all right, I'm going to push this shade on and clear out here, and it's attached to your house, but it's within your setbacks. Why can't you do that?
You can under current code.
Yeah, so why are we? I mean, then I don't think you should be able to take up more than 30% of your lot that you have out there, because you have setbacks.
Right, but the code allows for that, but the 30% rule is making it to where that works just fine on quarter-acre lots and third-acre lots and everything. But R18, it just doesn't work. The math is.
The percentages aren't applied to the total lot. They're applied to side yard and backyard.
Right. And that side yard and backyard is defined by what?
Your site plan. Your site plan is the first. Correct. Setbacks are simply a space that you are required to observe between your boundary and fixed structures.
Okay, but if it's attached to your house, then they can go all the way to the setbacks, correct?
Correct.
If it's a structure, and if it's a shade structure, you can go within 3 feet of the property line.
Are we changing the definition? Why don't we change the definition of shade structure and awnings not to be categories as accessory building?
Can I maybe just address that? If you build a house, you can build your house clear through the entire lot up to the setbacks all the way around. If you build your house 10 feet from the setback with a 10-foot setback and you add an awning, the awning is not part of the structure by ordinance, right? And therefore, you're limited to 30% of the backyard. You cannot fill your entire backyard to the setback with an awning, because an awning, according to the ordinance, is defined to be a separate structure from the home.
But if you attach it, it's part of the
Even if
home.
it's attached.
Even if it's attached, it's not.
I mean, that
part
would
of
be
structure?
beautiful, right? As long as we attach it, we can fill up the entire backyard. Yeah, but that's.
Only if it's like a roof.
I'll take a stab at this to clarify.
Please.
So a home builder comes in and builds a house, a new construction house on a lot. Where he stops the back wall of his house, that determines where the backyard starts. It has nothing to do with the setbacks.
Yeah, I don't
Once
agree with that.
you drop your house on the plot, your backyard now starts, and you need to abide by the 30% from that back wall.
Okay, but if I want to do a remodel, I can't.
You can add on up to the setbacks.
They're two separate issues, that's all.
I'm just saying it doesn't make sense that that your awning couldn't be part of your house. I mean, if it's attached to your home and fixed to your home, that I see these new homes being built all the time with the pergolas coming off of them that are attached to the homes. When they built it, that's part of the home. So you're telling me we can't do an addition to add to the setbacks with an awning? It's an addition to the home.
So
it's not a shade structure. It's part of you're fixing it to the house. Therefore, it's part of the house, correct?
The distinguished one is really close. You're right there. This is the connection. So if the backyard, let's say, is just 2,000 square feet, defined by the back corners lateral to the side yard, that's all defined as back. And let's just say there's a 10-foot setback on all sides. That only pertains, the 2,000 square feet, I'm now allowed to build a third of that, so 666 square feet, if my math is anywhere close. So the point is that if they wanted to build 700 square feet and they were inside the setbacks, they wouldn't be able to build it. So the setbacks are only consuming some of that 2,000 square feet, and they cannot fill that. They can only fill 1/3 of it. So it's a matter of percentage. They're not able to get to the percentage that they want while honoring the setbacks. Orox is, I guess, the example. Orox honors all the setbacks. He broke the percentage of the backyard coverage limit while being inside the setback. So both can be true. They can be inside the setbacks and be breaking an arbitrary 30% rule. And that's the rule we're asking to be 40% or 35% or something else. Always honoring setbacks. So both can be true. We're following the setback rules,
I'm confused.
and
So,
I'm building
what you
more
need to
awning
know is-
percentage than I'm allowed.
So I'm not going to call it arbitrary, because I was with them last month and they spent hours and hours on that 30%.
Your attorneys treat words
I'll send you
differently.
the YouTube video. You can watch it. It was not arbitrary. Your code has a provision for shade structures that lets them go within 3 feet of the property line if they're attached. So the code has an exception to setback rule for attached shade structures. And it gives it conditions, restrictions that it must comply with. Building permits, one of them, right? Fire rated material. If you're going to go within 3 feet, you got to be fire rated. It has a height limitation. It can't be higher than the roof line, right?
Right.
But one of those conditions is also the 30% rule, which is if you're attached and you go to 3 feet from the boundary line, your shade structure must not be more than 30% of the rear yard.
So 70% of my backyard could be inside the setback, but I don't get to cover more than 30%.
What if you stay out of the 3 foot?
This one is for attached. This one's for attached shade structures.
So sorry, hold on a second. He's got to answer this for me because I get lost real quick. So if it doesn't go over the 3 feet and it stays within the 8 foot, say they're 8 foot or 10 foot setbacks, can they do the whole thing?
No.
Or is it still 33%?
30%.
So this
30%.
provision is allowing them to protrude into the setback if they meet certain conditions. That's what this one's doing. And so it really applies to these small backyard scenarios, right? Our code lets you get into the setback if you meet the conditions that are needed to get there.
I think that's
but
where
if you have a
it's
small, but if you have a small backyard, you can't go the whole length of it because
The percentage still punishes small backyards. Yeah.
right. That's what I'm saying though. But and they're not in their setbacks, then I think they should be. I'm just mind boggled that I can't attach something to my house, do a remodel on my house, add on, and still be within my setbacks and still be able to build my home.
So you probably can. If it's a permitted remodel and it's built in the same structures and the materials of the house, that's not treated like an awning. Yeah.
But I'm just saying though that
if you're hiring Stewart or Stewart's brother or any of the other good companies, and by the way, their reputation is really good at Washington City Hall. Like I'll confirm that. Stewart brings their people in, they verify that the city's not concerned. But yeah, if you come in and permit a remodel or an addition to your house, the shade structure code does not restrict that. You still have the percentages of structures, right? Like there's still a percentage that you've got to abide.
So it's like Eldon said, you define your backyard space with your home,
with your site plan,
your original site plan.
The 30% rule only matters if it's in a detached building or a shade structure that's attached. It has nothing to do with the remodel.
I guess in my mind, I'm kind of leaning towards Pete's. I mean, I get this vision. Like if you can originally build a home and fill up your whole area right up to your setbacks, why can you not come in later? Yeah, you defined your backyard space, but why can you not come in later and build this awning that takes you where you could have had you built your
Well, the problem is,
home in the original?
like just tonight, we just approved a whole subdivision of houses where they're going right up to their 10-foot setback. The people that are buying those homes aren't deciding that. We approve that to happen.
But if they're up to their setbacks, then they can't put it back there.
No, per the code, they can put an awning back there that goes up to 3 feet. We're just saying that in Desert Ridge, for example, as that example, they got 462 square feet of backyard, okay? If they stay within the setbacks on the code, all right, under our current thing, they can put 138 square feet. I'm just saying if we do a tiered, they'll be able to do 231 square feet of porch, which is still super, super teeny, but at least it's not, a little thing over their door and that's it.
So the easiest way to say this, and I thought of a better way, if the backyard is defined as 100%, on big lots, after you take the setbacks of the standard setbacks, okay, and you have to delineate, the awnings do have different setbacks. So when we say setbacks, we have to clarify. Awnings already, because of 7 years ago, our work already has its own language. The 3-foot setback was us. So 100%, the setback taken off from one big lot is 10% of the total square footage. You do it on a small 8,000 and it's now 40%. So now you live inside the setbacks and I have 60% left or a smaller amount. The awning can consume only 30%. And that doesn't affect big lots when 100% minus setbacks is still 80,000 square feet or whatever. But when you only had 10,000, then you take setbacks off and you're left with a small amount. Now you can break the 30% of what's left really quickly before you ever get any shade. So it really is why it's only applicable to small lots is the consumption percentage happens quicker and breaks the 30% rule so fast that you end up with nothing. It doesn't happen on big lots, only small lots.
I think that what we ought to do, and do you see why the tiered approach comes in, why Corey's thinking that way? I think that, at least for me, maybe that's the recommendation that we should look at to city council is that they look at this with a tiered approach. I mean, I don't know if they're paying attention, they're probably not, but I mean, we've got that here, obviously. And Dad, I know in the past you've spoke for us and you can certainly do it again with regards to the struggle we're having here when this gets to city council, one way or the other.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the benefits of just having one city attorney is that I attend both meetings and I'm happy to share with them how this has gone.
Yeah. And we don't have to try and rewrite all this. Like we can just say, we're not recommending this, we're recommending a tiered approach, and we just tie it to a zoning. We can say R18 can use 50% for shade structures, R110 can use 40%, R115 and higher can use the 30% that's already there in the code. And we just say on detached structures, that any detached structures take away from that that percentage, so they can't
just
like
a-
double it up.
It's a denial with recommendation.
No, it's an approval with an amended recommendation.
Is it an approval of the denial that's recommended?
Because it's recommended we deny it.
So on a specific application that's got details, that language is more important. This is an ordinance change. I think the city council just wants to know your viewpoint, right? That's really what's useful here.
So we just say we approve an amended version of this or something, and just.
I would just say we have a motion to send this on to the city council and let them know that we, the planning commission, think A, B, and C are important, right?
I think that works.
It's the stop sign thing again.
Yes.
Council's going to
it's very
rewrite the
similar to
ordinance
that.
anyway.
This is our
Yeah.
idea. It's all yours.
So in addition to that, we've beaten this thing up so bad we killed the audio, so Melody can't hear what we're talking about. And so she said, internally, there's some audio problems. We just need to make sure whatever we make as a motion, that Thad, you're aware of what it is, and hopefully Steve and Thad can make sense of it when it comes to city council.
Do you want to have a little humor added?
Yeah.
The internet feed tonight is spotty, so all of the recording is not here. So I'm going to take notes anyway to make sure I get your motion right.
You're earning your money tonight.
This is a 35-minute motion. Keep going.
You want me to try it? Do you want me to try a motion? You want me to try it?
I want you to try a motion, and I want Thad to be really careful about his notes, because this is, yeah. Maybe you ought to record it with your phone or something.
I'm ready.
All right.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I'll make a motion to consider amending a portion of the city code, more specifically, Chapter 8B, Single Family Residential. Oh, and we want to more than just R1. So I don't know how we want to do it. Just, how do you want to do it? Section.
I think it's good enough. Just
Section
tell us-
6, title whatever.
Yeah.
We want to amend a portion of the city code dealing with shade structures in the rear yard. Not the recommendation from the applicant, but we are recommending a tiered approach that R1 8 or smaller lots can take up to 50% of the rear yard, still falling within all the setback requirements that are already in code.
So just to, can take up to 50% for a shade structure, right?
50% of the backyard for shade structure, for an attached shade structure.
Okay. Anything else?
R110 would be 40%. R115 and higher would be the 30% that's already there. For detached structures, the same tiering system for shade structures minus any percentage of the backyard taken up by an accessory structure. So for example, if they've used all their if they've used 30% for a detached structure, then they would only have the remainder. And send it to city council for consideration.
That's the end of your motion? Okay, well, we don't have to write the ordinance yet. We just need to write the motion. Are you wanting to address accessory dwelling units? I'm just totally kidding, by the way.
What about traffic?
Well, the legislature's, authorizing these accessory dwelling units that could fit in the backyard and
have
anyway,
a daycare under it.
Our ordinance is never perfect, but this is a really good motion to address the application and the issue.
Second that. I'll second that.
So-
Want you all to know I've been 4 hours, so I'm sorry I had to take a break.
I've got a motion by Anderson. Thad, before we do that, are you clear on that, on everything, or do we need to?
Yes, I'm clear.
A motion by Commissioner Anderson, a second by Commissioner Shield. Individual voting, Bullock,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Shield,
Aye.
Tupo,
Aye.
I'm Hanson, I'm an aye as well. And guys, I appreciate it. I don't even know what to say. We're our own worst critic, and I always say how much of a terrible job I do up here. This might be my last meeting. I don't even know how I got through that. I'm so confused, but I trust these guys that know more than I do about this stuff. So I appreciate you coming and being part of it. Thank you. Is there anything else that needs to come before the staff before we adjourn tonight's meeting. I do have one quick comment, but if you guys have anything, guys and gals. One thing I was going to say is and I asked Eldon about this, I just want to make a note that we received an email about a meeting with less than 24 hours notice to come and check on a project or two big projects and want to come to the city. Yeah, important ones, right? And I was out of state, couldn't attend. I hope that doesn't happen again. I don't know how to word that. If we really want to, if the city wants us to be involved with the planning process with projects that are coming, and I don't know the parameters of why we were given such a short notice, but we need to be given a fair notice that we can try to make it to that meeting. Because I would have done everything to be there had I not been out of state. And I really want to participate as a planning commission in these bigger projects coming to us in the city. So I just wanted, Eldon, I've already mentioned that to you, you know that. So I just want to make a note of that the city understands that we do want to be a part of the process moving forward early on with the big projects. And I'm sure there's a reason why it worked out the way it did, but if at all possible, we could get more heads up in the future, we need that. So that's it. I don't have anything else. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. My second?
All right. Oh yeah, I guess I could say what, so moved or something, but all right. All in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Recording stopped.
Hey, thank you for your time.
Thanks, you guys. Seriously, appreciate your time. Sorry to keep you so.